April 23rd, and I'll ask our city clerk for a roll call.
John Harabedian, Mayor.
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem John Kaposha.
Here.
Councilmember Rochelle Arzmendi, absent. Councilmember Denise Del Mar.
Here.
Councilmember Jean Gosh.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum and may conduct city business.
Great, thank you. If you'll please stand, Councilmember Goss is going to lead us in the pledge and the invocation.
Please place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, in trying to come up with some words for invocations, it's always kind of a stickler for us up here. How can we come up with something that is useful and inspiring? And I thought I'd just turn to some famous and wise words from 5 of our former presidents. And hopefully they're useful, and hopefully they'll set the tone for the evening. Let's go back to the 19th century to President Grover Cleveland, who remarked, "Unswerving loyalty to duty, constant devotion to truth, and a clear conscience will overcome every discouragement and surely lead the way to usefulness and high achievement." President William Howard Taft: "We must dare to be great, and we must realize that greatness is the fruit of toil and sacrifice and high courage." Franklin Delano Roosevelt: "Men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own minds." This is my favorite. Harry Truman: "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit." And finally, George Herbert Walker Bush said, "No problem of human making is too great to be overcome by human ingenuity, human energy, and the untiring hope of the human spirit." With that, I yield the floor to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. That was nice. You may be seated. All right. Any changes to the agenda?
None.
None.
All right. I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And mayor and council reports. I'll start to my left.
Okay, I have a very brief report. A week ago, Friday night, I got to attend the Sierra Madre Foundation, Library Foundation mixer, where they kind of kicked off their effort to get a discussion going about building a new library in the city of Sierra Madre. And it was a really nice event. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of give and take. And we were also given information about what the foundation has been doing. They actually have a proposed mock-up. It's not a final mock-up, but it's just a set of ideas at their new website. So if you have any interest in getting involved, or if you just want to take a peek at what they're talking about in the very early stages of the discussion, you want to go to Sierra Madre libraryfoundation.org. I'll repeat that. Sierra Madre libraryfoundation.org. My council colleagues, Arizmendi and Mayor Pro Tem Capocha, were there with me, and I think it was a nice evening. Thank you.
Great.
Nothing for me.
Okay, just one thing is I am a member of I'm the representative on the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, and I also participate on the Environmental Committee. We did take a tour of a company, a trash hauler called CR&R, out to their facility out in Paris. And what they do is anaerobic digestion. And basically what that does is the microbes eat the leaf waste that we produce and create renewable natural gas. And so they've got a pretty impressive facility, and they've built it, and it's operating successfully. And it's costly, though, and what they did is all their member cities that they signed on to do this, they had to raise their rates. But each city council voted unanimously in favor of paying a couple dollars more to get that, recapture that methane rather than let it go into the atmosphere, just to help with, climate change. So it was pretty impressive, so I just wanted to report on that. I'm looking forward to Athens is going to give us a presentation on what they're up to. And, but this goes along with George Walker's Bush comment that there is no problem that we've created that we can't solve. So I think it's on the line of that. But anyway, very impressive. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I don't have a report, so we will go to public comment for items not on the agenda. If you could keep your comments to 3 minutes.
David Gordon, in my guise as president of the Sierra Madre Playhouse. On May the 3rd, we're having a rather unusual event at the Playhouse. As you all know, for many years the Playhouse was the Wisteria Theatre. It became a movie theatre in either 1923 or 1924, in the age of the silence. And we are showing a silent film on May the 3rd, which is 100 years old, a film made in 1919 by Harry Houdini, called The Grim Game. And it features him, it's a full-length feature film, 72 minutes, which was lost until 2015, when it was rediscovered. And we are playing it with a musical accompaniment by Michael Mazzilla, who's the doyen of cinema piano accompanists. And we're doing this in collaboration with the Catalina Island Museum. The museum has, for 32 years, been having a silent film festival. And they wanted to have a little sort of foothold on the mainland. And through a series of coincidences, they came to the Sierra Madre Playhouse. The coincidence being my daughter-in-law, who is a violinist who often accompanies Michael. And she was going to play, but she's found a better offer, so unfortunately she's not playing. But I would urge everybody who's listening to get their tickets for this event. It's a benefit, and the proceeds will be split between the Playhouse and the Catalina Island Museum. A good example of collaboration between different forms of arts organizations. It'll be a fantastic evening. It's being introduced by John Cox, who is a Houdini expert, who has his own website on Houdini. Every single fact you might ever want to know about Houdini is there. And Michael is also going to talk about the importance of music in silent films. So do please come and see the Wisteria Theatre brought back to life for one evening. Thank you.
What was the date? Sorry, David.
May the 3rd.
May 3rd. Okay.
What time?
At 8 o'clock.
8 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Liza Kerrigan. I live at 551 Alta Vista Drive, and I'm here to mention Christian Court. I don't want it out of your minds. I'm part of the Community Service Commission, and we're working on making decisions about Christian Court. It's been tough going, I think. It's gone back to the steering committee at this point for further design decisions. But I think one of the reasons why it's been tough going is because the Christian Court, which is essentially a center, a commercial center in Sierra Madre, and kind of a psychological center in Sierra Madre, is being treated as not part of a town plan, not part of a greater civic idea about a center of Sierra Madre. It's trying to be developed by Parks and Recreation and their steering committee, and they have very good points to contribute, but it's framed in the wrong, it's in the wrong committee. It should be part of a town plan. It should be part of a 100-year decision about Sierra Madre and a civic sort of presence in Sierra Madre. And the discussion isn't there. So when it does come to you, I hope that you consider the decisions that have been made and perhaps a larger vision for where it could go. Thank you.
Dear Council, my name is Andrea, and I want to thank you for the opportunity for having me back here for the second time for the public hearing. The script which I have prepared for today, I'm not going to read it. I have decided to just freeform and freestyle, and hopefully we can engage in a different kind of conversation. I understand that Sierra Madre, before we moved here, has always been known that of a prestigious town that is peaceful, that's beautiful, everything is pink and rosy, and nothing could possibly go wrong, and no crimes could ever occur here. And as I had mentioned during the last comment, where on April 4th, we were at the DA's office where one neighbor who has been harassing me for close to 10 months finally was charged with the crime called theft. Even though the charges, is only one of the many in 10 months' time, and many of which I have already claimed that SMPD have always continued to ignore and deny, and specifically Sergeant Henry, was most pointedly very, very hostile upon his HB visit, which I feel very disheartened by. So I am here today to engage a general conversation rather than specific ones, because I understand in about maybe half hour we will be at the public hearing about the very issue of the private road, which I have prepared documentations for, and I have also sent every council member, as see here, 10 different documentations documenting regards to the safety of the home, the harassment, and or anything pertaining to the trail and the safety of which. It's only been 10 months that we have lived here, and there cannot possibly be so many complaints, 40 or more, and or visits from the police and or fire departments included most recently of those 2 visits, which none of those warranted and or led to a citation and or a ticket. So I do not understand why there are so many unwanted visits, and which I am grateful for our city manager, Gabrielle. I have only 1 minute left, and so I'll try to conclude as soon as I can. He had finally said several weeks ago that he would finally tell the SMPD to go ahead and issue crime reports against crimes that occurs. And I'm very grateful. It only took nearly 10 months for crimes to finally be taken by Sierra Madre Police Department. My question is this: why hasn't it done so today? Why hasn't it been the practice? Why hasn't it been lawful on the part of the Sierra Madre Police Department? And that is an open question. So I would like to follow up on this at the next meeting, and more prepared as well, because today's focus, I believe, will be focused on the private road, which our house was hit by a FedEx truck the second week that we moved here, and all the complaints, either about the pipe, the trash, and anything that we can possibly imagine, have all been said to us. We are happy to move, and here's my open invitation as an off-market offer to anyone in Sierra Madre who is interested in purchasing our home and do what they want with it. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? These are items not on the agenda.
Hello, my name is Paul Woloski. I'm at 631 East Orange Grove. I want to address the private road issue.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be on the agenda. So that's a little bit later. She was talking tangentially about the private roads, but it was more personal.
Can I make my comment?
No, you can't. You have to wait until it's actually on the agenda. So when that item comes, you can stand up and make your comment.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I heard her mention it, that's why.
It was a little bit gray there. Any comments for items not on the agenda?
Mary Lou Caldwell. I'm here representing the Kiwanis, inviting everyone to our annual chili cook-off boot scooting event on May 11th at 6 p.m. in the Recreation Center. This is the major fundraiser for the Kiwanis, and some of the events that the Kiwanis support are the Huck Finn, which we just had and was very successful. I weighed fish. And we support the 4th of July parade. Some of the projects that the Kiwanis have done in the past, they were responsible for collecting the money for the light in Memorial Park in the band shell. And they did raise the funds for the paramedic van here in Sierra Madre. We support the children at the middle school and we mentor them. We also encourage them to volunteer for some of the activities here in town. And the event is at 6 o'clock in the Recreation Center. I have tickets with me tonight, so after the meeting, if anyone would like to purchase a ticket, I do have them. They are $30. You will have chili. We will also have hot dogs and just tons of food. There's also an open bar that they will have. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a few others that look like they were coming up.
Good evening, council members. My name is Marvin Holmes, and I'm an employee with the LA County Sanitation Districts and a resident of the nearby city of Monrovia, California. I think I have some very good news for you and all of the residents of Sierra Madre. I'm proud to report that the Sanitation District's management and the employee union have reached a tentative agreement in our negotiations. The agreement provides a full 7% employee contribution to CalPERS and modest COLAs over the next 5 years. The agreement resolves all outstanding labor issues and assures that our service will remain outstanding. Our revenues will continue to exceed our expenses. Our reserve funds will remain high, and our rates will continue to be the lowest in the nation.
Everyone's waiting till the end to.
Okay. We, the Sanitation District employees, urge the support of our agreement when it comes before the Board of Directors for a vote in the very near future. And to Mr. Capocia, the Sanitation District has a program where we take food waste and we placing it now in our existing digesters at our main treatment plant. And we have a gas system which our vehicles use and other vehicles use to run by natural gas. But this extra fuel will be used by the trucks, cars, and any extra will be sent to Southern California Gas Company for their use. You should check that out sometime.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Any other comments for items not on the agenda? And with that, we have a few presentations which we will get through expeditiously. I know we have a full house here. And the first one is a proclamation in recognition of Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. And we have representatives here, as we do every year, from the Armenian National Committee of America, Pasadena Division, Bogus Patatian and Sholig Yapramian. So welcome again for coming. I'm going to read the certificate of recognition and then present it to you, and you guys can say a few words if you like. But we do this every year really because this was the first genocide of the 20th century, and shockingly, the perpetrators of the Armenian genocide still have not admitted or taken ownership of it, which is unlike all other genocides of that century, unfortunately. And we do it really because genocide is still a current thing that lives with us today in society, unfortunately, and ethnic cleansing and atrocities like that are still taking place. And we do it really not only to honor those who have perished in the past in all genocide, but to really stand up and say, even on a local level, that we don't tolerate it, and that going forward, really speaking truth to power about those that are doing this, whether they're close to us or far from us, that we stand with the victims. So I'll read this. It's from the city of Sierra Madre, and it's the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. Whereas from 1915 to 1923, 1.5 million Armenians lost their lives at the hands of the Ottoman Turkish Empire as part of a systematic program of genocide. And whereas the Armenian genocide is a tragic example of what fear and intolerance of others leads to, the city of Sierra Madre is dedicated to remembering the atrocities committed against the Armenian nation and all humanity. And whereas the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day commemorates this tragedy and helps people understand the need to eliminate fear and other hatred from our community. And whereas, as we remember the past, it is important that we dedicate ourselves to rebuilding a greater future by educating our community about the Armenian Genocide and other crimes against humanity as a testament to mankind's indomitable spirit. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre celebrates the Armenian spirit and hereby pays tribute to and recognizes those who have suffered as a result of the Armenian Genocide. Approved this 23rd day of April 2019 by the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre, Mayor John Harabedian, Mayor Pro Tem John Capocha, Council members Rochelle Arizmendi, Denise Del Mar, and Jean Goss.
Honorable Mayor Harabetian, Sierra Madre City Council members, staff, and audience, good evening. Shoike Premian, current chair of Armenian National Committee of America, Pasadena chapter. On behalf of my ANCA board and the Armenian community, I would like to thank the City of Sierra Madre City Council for this proclamation, as you always do every April. I'm here today with my fellow board member, Boaz Patatian. The Armenian National Committee of America is the largest and most influential Armenian American grassroots organization. We actively advance the concerns of the Armenian American community on a broad range of issues. As you all know, the month of April is a somber time for our community as we approach April 24th, which is tomorrow, to commemorate the Armenian Genocide. This year marks 104th anniversary of the genocide as our communities continue to fight for justice. Starting tonight and all day tomorrow, there are gatherings, commemorations, and marches scheduled. I'm also pleased to announce that now 49 out of 50 states have recognized the Armenian Genocide. The state of Mississippi is the only U.S. state that has not yet recognized the Armenian Genocide. This is the hard work of ANCA. At the national level, I would like to also announce that Senate Foreign Relations Committee ranking Democrat Bob Menendez of New Jersey and former presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz of Texas introduced Armenian genocide legislation on April 10, reaffirming proper U.S. recognition and remembers of the crime and rejecting U.S. complicity in its denial. The measure is the companion of the Armenian Genocide Resolution, H.R. 296, introduced in early April by House Select Committee on Intelligence Chair Adam Schiff of California and Representative Gus Bilirakis of Florida, which has over 75 original co-sponsors. This is just a brief update. So on behalf of my board, thank you all for your continued support, recognizing the Armenian Genocide in the city of Sierra Madre.
And we now transition to an update from a proudly owned Armenian company, Athens Services. So, gentlemen, why don't we proceed?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Christian Warner. I'm a Vice President of Government Affairs at Athens Services. We're your exclusive waste and recycling vendor, and we're very grateful to be your vendor here in Sierra Madre, and I thank you for your time tonight to give you this brief presentation. I'm here with Mr. Ed Chen behind me, who's Director of Government Affairs at Athens. And tonight I'd like to share with you some things that have been happening in our industry, also at Athens Services, and some what we call a green initiative, or the things that we're doing at Athens to help beautify our communities, to help with carbon footprints that we're all leaving, and to also talk about how we're dealing with the different assembly bills and things that are affecting our state. This last year to 2 years has been a very difficult time for the waste industry. We've been dealing with what we call the China Sword Initiative, which over the last 20 years, the country of China has been basically taking most of the recyclables that the United States has been able to produce. They take them, they recycle those products, and then they send them back to the United States and to other countries. They've essentially cut that off for decisions that they've made in their government in an effort to clean up their area. And so that's hit us, the United States, very difficult. It's hard for us to get rid of recyclables now. It's financially difficult for many companies. And it's some of the recyclables that we could normally recycle are ending up in the landfills. And so we at Athens have been doing all that we can to combat that issue. We've also been hit with a couple assembly bills from the state of California that I'm going to touch on very briefly to tell you what we're doing. Now, I've left copies of this packet for you so that you could look at it at your leisure, go through some of the details. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly to summarize what's going on at Athens. At Athens, we currently own 2 MRFs, which are material recycling facilities, one in the city of Industry and one in Sun Valley, and we're about to break ground on a 3rd MRF in the city of Irwindale. This is where we take the mixed waste from practically all of our cities to be recycled so that we can remove those recyclables before taking the rest of the trash to landfill. Sierra Madre's mixed waste from the commercial multifamily goes to our MRF and helps us to keep your city in compliance with AB 939, which allows you to be above 50% recycling. This is a picture of our Sun Valley MRF, which was just built just a couple years ago. We also own what's called a construction and demolition recycling facility, or a C&D facility, also in Sun Valley, where we're able to take our construction and demolition that we pick up and recycle over 80% of that material so that very little goes to the landfill. This is one of the highest diverting C&D facilities in the state of California. This is a picture of some C&D material that you might see. It's debris when you're doing some demolition and different projects around your home or in other construction sites. Another facility that we own is called American Organics. This is an organic facility out in Victorville, California, where we have been taking residential green waste as well as commercial organics. We take it to this facility where we're able to turn those organics into compost. It takes anywhere from 3 to 4 months to do this process. And here's a picture of, from up high, of what that organics facility looks like. And we take that organic material, turn it into compost, and then we return that compost, a lot of that material, to cities like Sierra Madre for our free compost giveaways. We also sell a lot of that compost to local farmers in the area. This allows us to keep green waste and organics out of the landfills, where it would normally be producing gases that are harmful to the economy. Here's another picture of what these are called windrows. This is what the organic material looks like when it's sitting there for 3 to 4 months. Mr. Kaposha, I've actually talked with a member of your San Gabriel board, and we're going to be setting up a tour for your group to come and see our American Organics facility. One of the exciting things that we've recently done is we've been working with a domestic equipment manufacturer to develop a hydraulic screw press, which basically looks like a giant screw. And what this does is we take waste that we collect, that we've processed, we take the waste that would normally go to the landfill, we wring out all of the liquid material out of that trash through this screw press. We then take that liquid, and it can be used in multiple ways. One of the things we're doing is we're taking some of it to our organics facility to help with the other organics and green waste to turn it into compost. But the gentleman who just spoke a little bit earlier about the wastewater treatment plant for county sanitation in Carson, we are actually partnering with them, and we'll be signing an agreement sometime in the next couple weeks where we will be taking most of this liquid material to their facility, which is an anaerobic digester, and is used to basically turn that material, go through the anaerobic digestion process. It cleans it up and turns it into CNG, which can be used for vehicles. So we're really excited about this opportunity that we're going to be working with county sanitation and taking that material to them. Another exciting thing that we're doing at Athens, and this is still very, very new, is we're taking a lot of the recyclables that have recently been banned by China, and we are turning it into a very small, specific material. We're putting it through optical sorters and screens and grinders, and we turn it into this very fine material that we're then able to take. It's called solid recovered fuel, which is used as an offset or an alternative to the use of coal for burning at cement kilns. So we're able to replace that coal and provide them with a much cleaner burning material. And this process has had a tremendous impact on the carbon footprint of Athens cities. Finally, we are in the business of using landfills' renewable natural gas. We have 3 of our operating yards where we park the trucks each night that currently have CNG, or compressed natural gas, lines that are built under the ground, and they come in right to our yard, and our trucks are able to fuel up, slow fill each night for the next day. We are getting this CNG from landfills. At those landfills, they're taking the gas that would normally be put into the air, harmful gas. It's being turned into CNG and then piped to our trucks where we're using that CNG instead of diesel. This is really helping with AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act. And just to give you an example, in 2018, Athens used over 330,000, what we're going to, the acronym is MMBTUs, of renewable gas to run its trucks, which would normally be equivalent to over almost 2.4 million gallons of diesel fuel, which we did not need to use. So these are all really exciting things that we're doing, what we call our green initiative, ways to combat the China sword, and ways to help with our carbon footprint, reduce our carbon footprint, recycle as much as we can, and be a good partner with not only Sierra Madre, but all of the cities that where we pick up trash in the San Gabriel Valley. There are some other details here in this packet that as you go through it, please feel free to ask me any questions at this time, or at another time if you want to leave those questions with your staff or contact me directly. I'll be happy to answer those or talk with you more on these matters. But that's my presentation for tonight.
Thank you, Christian. Any questions or, yeah? Sure. We'll open up for some questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming. What is your plan? I think it's when, 2020 or 2022, when we have to start taking the commercial organics, the food waste from restaurants, and that can't go to a landfill anymore. So that has to be recycled.
Right.
So what is your plan for handling that? How are you going to deal with that?
Well, there's a lot of good news there. First of all, I just want to let you know that we've already begun having discussions with your staff on how we're going to deal with this in the city. And we will be coming back to the council over the next few months to present more on that and to hopefully make some good decisions that are best for the city along those lines. But specifically, we're dealing with AB 1826, commercial organics, which is currently effective right now, and that requires specific commercial customers to separate their organics. The hauler then collects it separately and takes it to an organic facility. We're complying right now in the city, which is good, but over time, it's going to become necessary where all commercial customers are going to have to separate their organics. We're able to take that material to our organics facility in Victorville. We're already taking organics there, turning it into compost, and keeping it out of the landfills.
Okay.
The other assembly bill is called AB 1594. That kicks into place in January of next year. That requires your residential green waste to go somewhere else other than a landfill. It will no longer be allowed at a landfill where it's currently used as alternative daily cover, which is a recyclable product. That will no longer be allowed starting next year. We will be able to take that residential green waste to our organics facility to turn it into compost. So we'll be talking with your staff about these programs. You mentioned it earlier when you visited the CR&R facility, talked about councils that had to look at rates and approve different rates. Those are the different things that we'll be discussing, is the costs involved, what can we do to minimize the rates the best we can, but still help the city to make sure that you are compliant with these laws that have been coming from the state of California.
Just another question, since you brought it up here with the landfills, you capture the gas coming off the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
But when you put it out there as a, mulching it, composting, the gas isn't captured in that case. I mean, are we doing more harm by keeping it out of the landfill where it decomposes in the landfill and you pipe off the gas versus composting it and the methane just goes into the atmosphere?
What's happening is through the process, and we're actually fine-tuning our organics facility right now. We're putting in some equipment to help reduce that process.
Mm-hmm.
But the composting process, I don't want to say it eliminates methane gas, but it reduces it by a large amount by turning it into compost. And so yes, the net effect is the amount of methane gas that's released into the air is much less than if you just take it to the landfill and let it sit there for 30 to 50 years.
Okay.
We have 5 to 10% of that composting process that isn't able to get composted because some people contaminate it and there's a little bit of trash and plastic in there. We have to take that to the landfill.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're seeing anywhere from 85 to 90% diversion, keeping that out of the landfill through that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's cut to the chase on anaerobic digestion.
Yeah.
Why is that workable for one hauler and yet not others? I mean, I'm still not fully understanding the big picture. They've come up with a business model
Mm-hmm.
that works for them, and they claim that, the rates that they're charging, the increased rates is kind of because they had to put the technology together and design
Right.
the plant.
Right.
But it seems to me now that the plant is designed, it could be expanded easily, and, the cost will come down. Why is that not a viable option for Athens?
Well, it is. And as I mentioned, we're actually partnering with County Sanitation to take a lot of our material to their anaerobic digester.
The county has one too? Oh.
County Sanitation has one in the city of Carson. It's their wastewater treatment plant. And so the liquid material that we're getting out of our organic screw press,
Yeah.
like I said, in about 2 weeks, we're signing our contract where we'll be taking all of that liquid material to their facility, and it'll be digested into that
Yeah.
compressed natural gas for trucks.
Mhm.
We're also continuing to look into possible anaerobic digestion for ourselves to own.
Yeah.
But right now, we're partnering with County Sand because they already have it in place, and that allows us to immediately take it there.
Yeah.
What we're finding is anaerobic digestion technology is not quite where we'd all like it to be. There's still a lot of material at the end of that process that has to go to the landfill, which is why we're still taking our time to really find the right mix of anaerobic digestion that gets you the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak.
Okay.
So we're doing it right now within the next few weeks, and we're also looking into long-term solutions as we have for organics and our MRFs and our C&D MRF. So that's one of the things that the owners of our company have always done.
Yeah.
They've always been looking in the forefront, taking into consideration the different assembly bills and the laws,
Yeah.
and saying, how can we help our cities comply and be good recyclers in this state?
Yeah, your business is definitely becoming more high-tech
Yes,
as time goes on.
very much so. And our infrastructure is building and building in order to handle all of the needs that we have.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay?
Just a quick comment. I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with the idea of you reducing your diesel fuel use as drastically as you have. That is, as I think everyone is aware, the most dangerous pollutant when it's burned and sent into the atmosphere because of the fine particulates. So you're getting rid of millions of gallons of that. You're reducing carbon, and you're able to reduce landfill. I mean, that's quite a statement.
Yeah. We've
It's
practically,
very good news.
I think we've replaced all of our diesel trucks with CNG trucks. And one of the good things about your contract is, while we're here, as those trucks come into their useful life, which is every 7 to 10 years, We have to replace those trucks with new CNG trucks, with new technology trucks. That's on us. And so you're going to continually see nice, clean burning trucks in your city as long as you have us here in your city. Yeah.
If I can make a suggestion,
Yeah.
I'd like you to put more effective mufflers on them. They're really loud, and I don't think they need to be that loud.
Okay. Okay. I take that serious. I know what you're saying.
Thank you.
And I believe that over time, that is going to happen. You're right. They are quite loud.
Councilmember Dunmore?
It's certainly fitting that we have this presentation during Earth Week. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but certainly thank you for trying to save our Earth. We appreciate it.
We're doing our best. Thank you.
Yeah, and Christian, thank you for coming. I think that there's a lot here to unpack. We could talk forever about it, but I think the recycling issue with the China sword is the most pressing. I think that we've all been asleep at the wheel with the recycling issue, especially on plastic. I mean, the reality is that 80% of the plastic that gets recycled doesn't actually get reused. It's really just ending up in a landfill or getting burned and overseas. And I think it is something that people need to wake up to. You know, the idea that we just put it in the blue bin and we're doing our part, we've been basically been sold a bill of goods, right? I mean, a lot of that stuff that China was buying was not being reused at all.
Right.
So I think this is actually bringing this into the forefront, you know, for the world, but this country especially, because we need to figure out how to actually recycle that plastic. So I do appreciate you coming forward with
I
this.
feel kind of guilty with this plastic.
It's startling. If you look into the plastic issue, glass is pretty good. They actually recycle most of the glass. Plastic is terrible, frankly. So most of the plastic we use is actually not recycled plastic.
Yeah.
Look, that's a different conversation that we could have. But thank you for coming and kind of highlighting this for us.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Ed, for all your
and
work
Ed,
that you
of
do.
course. It's always good to see you, Ed.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Now we're going to be introduced to our interim chief of police, Jim Hunt. And Miguel.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'd like to introduce to you and the community of Sierra Madre the city's interim police chief, Jim Hunt. Chief Hunt began his law enforcement career in 1991 with the Monrovia Police Department. During his time at Monrovia, he worked in nearly every area of the department. Jim was appointed as Monrovia's chief of police in May of 2012 and served as chief for almost 7 years. He is a strong proponent of law enforcement and community partnerships, and the department was recognized multiple times by state and international organizations for their community policing programs. After 28 years of service, Jim retired as chief of police with the city of Monrovia in 2017. Jim has a master's degree in public administration from the University of La Verne. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy and California's Post Command College. Jim is a family man, married to his wife, Boisette. They have one daughter, Ashley, and a son-in-law, Lance. They have a 3-year-old grandson, Declan, and a 3-month-old granddaughter, Shayla. I'm proud to announce the appointment of Jim Hunt as interim police chief for the Sierra Madre Police Department.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. It's truly an honor to get to serve this community. Having worked for 27 plus years in the community just to the southeast, I'm familiar with Sierra Madre and what a great community it is. And I'm really looking forward to working with your staff. The staff that I've met already are outstanding, and being part of the team here and part of the public safety team. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to getting to know all of you in the near future.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, welcome. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the family. I don't know if any questions. I'd probably just let you go on your way, but
I do have a comment.
Yeah.
So I don't work in Sierra Madre. I work far from Sierra Madre, and I had the misfortune of seeing what happens when there's a long response time to calls. So I really appreciate Sierra Madre. I actually almost called you guys. I think you would have made it quicker than the other police department did. But I appreciate that we have this wonderful police department here and the fast response time.
I'd just like to comment too, is that, you know, it's good that you've worked in Monrovia, like you say. I consider Monrovia like one of our sister cities. We have a lot in common with them and the cooperation with them. So I hope that you use your experience and influence to continue to build that relationship, and where we can help and they can help us, and makes us all safer as a larger community. So
Yes.
Let's keep it short and sweet. Welcome, Chief.
Ditto. Here, here. Thank you,
we're
Chief.
glad to have you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you. And we will now unveil the new Sierra Madre Public Library logo.
Oh, this is exciting.
Yeah.
Good evening. We are here to unveil the new library logo. But first, we'll give you a little bit of background. So our first library logo was back in the 1950s, and it depicted the library building that had just been built. This logo was beautiful, and it served us for many decades. But as library services have changed, so too did our logo. So our second library logo was a beautiful design. It does have a lot of information, and it gets a bit unreadable when it's scaled down. So when you try and make it smaller, it's difficult to see all the wonderful services that are listed around the edges. The main focal point that you can see is the length of service since 1887 instead of the types of services that we provide. Next, the two departments, the library and the community services, briefly joined together, and we needed a single voice. So another logo was designed, and then we separated again. So now we're back to being separate library and community services departments. Community services continues to use the main logo here, except for they have eliminated library from it. Next, since the separation, the library has been operating without a logo. So work began in January with library staff, the library board of trustees, and with the Friends of the Sierra Madre Public Library to bring the library a logo that would be distinctly Sierra Madre. Without further ado, the new logo is here.
Oh, that's nice. I like it.
Good. It was designed. So it was designed to invoke two things that are quintessentially Sierra Madre. It's the view of the San Gabriel Mountains and the colors of the wisteria vine. And along with that is the image of the books for the library and library services arranged in the shape of the mountains. So we feel it's simple, it's direct, and it's adaptable for future use. And there we go.
Very nice.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Lori Garza. I'm one of the librarians at Sierra Madre Public Library, and with me tonight is Shannon King. She is the chair of the library trustees.
Yeah, so I just want to take a moment to thank Lori and Christine Smart, our city librarian. She's traveling and couldn't be with us tonight, but they've done a tremendous amount of work to come up with what I think is a beautiful logo. It'll be easy to use, even if you scale it down to read. Looks great in color. It's incorporating some of the city colors as well. And it'll look good in black and white. So I think this is something that we can use. We're going to start using it, I believe, here pretty shortly with the summer reading program, which launches on June 8th. So we're thrilled. I hope you are too.
Oh, it's great. It's perfect. It's really nice.
It really is nice.
I like the motto at the bottom, read, discover, and connect. That's very, very clever. Yeah.
Very nice work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we will now move on to our consent calendar. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first item is consent item 1A, authorization to expend regional park and open space district grant funds for the Christine Court project. Consent item 1B, city council liaison appointments and consideration of resolutions 19-15, 19-16, 19-17, and 19-18 pertaining to appointments of voting delegates to League of California Cities, the Los Angeles County Sanitation District, San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, and California Joint Powers Insurance Authority, respectively. Item 1C, consideration of resolution 19-19 to take corrective action regarding fees associated with business and residential alarm permits. Item 1D, consideration of Resolution 19-12, designating streets to be included in the fiscal year 2019 to 2020 street rehabilitation program. And last but not least, item 1E, adoption of Resolution 19-11 of the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre approving certain demands. And that concludes our consent items.
Thank you. Any items in particular that we have questions on?
I have a question about the Kirsten Court. I mean, this is to pay for, again, the landscape architect but we're not done, are we? I mean, where are we? We're paying for it now, but how much more work needs to be done?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. So at this point, the grants were officially executed through the actual contract with Regional Park and Open Space District as of January 16th, 2019. However, under Public Works, the actual contract management with LRM has been in effect up until the last few months to start having meetings with steering committee, receive community input via commission meetings with community services, and also designing the first round of conceptual drawings. So as of this point, if I can direct it to our director, Chris Amino, to confirm amount that has actually been spent under our landscape architect.
So far, we've only spent $16,000 with our architect. We're about a third of the way on just the conceptual designs.
Okay.
We anticipate coming to council in probably July with the conceptual designs.
Okay, I see. So this isn't, this is just authorizing the money. It doesn't mean that.
It read as though we've already spent it, you know.
Yeah.
That was the.
It was from the beginning when we accepted the grant, we initiated the design portion of it. We came to council with that, but we didn't ask for the expenditure at that time. So this is a little cleaning up our books so we can be able to spend the.
So we can spend for
Yes.
the remaining work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So the resolution
Okay.
authorized that initially, as did the actual contract that was executed by both agencies, the city and Regional Park and Open Space District. So now it's appropriating the full amount of the grant so that moving forward we can continue to make those payments.
Okay. Yeah, because you had the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so what?
Yeah, we came and we asked to approve the contract, but we didn't necessarily just accept the money for the county's standard. So now that's what we're doing today.
Okay.
Any other questions on 1A, B, C, D, or E?
I just have a question on B. I just want to know if 1917 got corrected.
So we did note that and it has been corrected. So, and we'll note that in whatever the motion is, the 1917 resolution, thanks to Councilmember Delmar for the catch. It should be Councilmembers Capocha and Arizmendi as the liaison and alternate for the COG. So that was changed. Anything else? Okay, I'll open this up for public comment for comments on the consent agenda. Any items? And seeing none, we'll bring it back to council.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I with just one, I will abstain from the street thing because Highland, where I live, is one of the streets on the list, so I had nothing to do with this.
How come your street got on?
You didn't have
Mine
to
didn't.
abstain. Yeah. Okay. And we'll move on to the first public hearing, and this is the consideration of Resolution 1914, applying the California Vehicle Code and Title 10 of the Municipal Code to certain privately owned streets, roads. Mr. Carlson?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Harabedian and members of the City Council. Item number 2 on your agenda this evening is a public hearing to consider Resolution 1914, which applies the California Vehicle Code and Title 10 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to certain privately owned and maintained roads in Sierra Madre. It is recommended that the City Council, 1, open a public hearing and take testimony from any interested persons and or the public, and 2, adopt Resolution 19-14. The City Council may also consider the limitation of applying the Vehicle Code and Title 10 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to fewer roads than have been identified on the resolution. And as always, the City Council may defer the consideration of the matter to a future meeting or take no action. City staff would like the Council to consider whether the application of vehicular regulations on private roads would benefit the community's interest in protecting its health, safety, and welfare. By approving Resolution 19-14, the Council would confirm the authority, but not the mandate, of the Sierra Madre Police Department to enforce vehicular regulations on the identified private roads. Staff has received numerous comments and questions as a result of the mailing out of the courtesy notices for this hearing, and staff would like to confirm that there is no intention of establishing any permanent parking restrictions on any of the private roads. The intention of this action is to prevent and mitigate any obstruction on a private road that would hinder the public safety vehicles, generally police department, fire department, from accessing any location in their efforts to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Should the Council wish to approve Resolution 19-14, but memorialize its intention not to introduce new permanent parking regulations, you may consider adding such direction to the motion or within a separate motion. Without the proposed resolution, city law enforcement officers would not be authorized to enforce unsafe driving practices or prevent unauthorized traffic and road obstructions on the city's private streets. Thank you. Director Semino, Attorney Highsmith, and myself are available to address any questions that you might have.
So, thank you, Mr. Carlson. I'll just open it up with, the first basic question is, why are we considering this? What happened that has caused us to consider this tonight?
Well, there's hypotheticals that are presented to staff at numerous times. The intention of this is to, at the direction of the city attorney, prohibit any obstruction or anything that would hinder our public safety departments from accessing places that they need to be. One perfect example that came to mind was the Santa Anita fire that was started, as you may remember, on Chantry Roads. It quickly moved up the mountain to the west, and the first place our fire department was able to locate and get access to was Sunrise Hill to begin the Battle of the Flames. Sunrise Hill is a private road. We would never want that road to be obstructed and for our fire department not to be able to reach the place they need to be.
Have we had any examples of the private roads being obstructed? Not necessarily in a public safety issue, but have there been other instances where city staff has, noticed that private roads were being obstructed?
I'd go ahead and refer that to City Attorney Highsmith.
Yes, there have been. And then it becomes a potential code enforcement issue, a safety issue. There's actually state legislation prohibiting blocking of the access of a fire truck. So these are some of the issues. But the broader issue is also public safety throughout the city, because right now the city does not have the authority to enforce the vehicle code. So we can't cite someone for unsafe driving or for speeding. And with this simple resolution, we would have the ability to do that. Not required to do it, but right now, if someone called and said there's somebody speeding up and down my street, if it's a private road, we do not have the authority to send a police vehicle out there to address that under the vehicle code. And so it's to have a more uniform safety throughout the city. If you adopt this resolution, the vehicle code will be applicable, but also Title 10 of the city's municipal code. Title 10 applies to both traffic. It includes traffic devices like stop signs, et cetera, the ability to impose, or I'm sorry, the ability to enforce various moving violations. There is a provision regarding traffic. It doesn't necessarily apply to every single street. And I understand there's some concern that by making it applicable to, making Title 10 applicable to private streets, that it may be overbroad, and that wasn't the intention. So I don't think the city has the same issue with private roads, which are not maintained with public funds. So unlike public roads, we don't send a street sweeper out to a private street and need to make sure that there are not cars parked in the way. So we don't have the same issues. And so one of the things that can be clarified if the council wants to move forward with this resolution is to give staff the direction to make whatever adjustments in the ordinance might be necessary to make it clear that we're not going to prohibit parking of residents on a private street. We don't do that now. So that's something to consider. You may be hearing from several residents that that was a concern that they might have. So if as you're listening to that, that is a direction you could give to staff, and yet you could still adopt the resolution. You could also give staff the direction to refrain from ticketing parking on private streets, which we don't do now, until the ordinance has been clarified. So long answer.
So currently on the private roads, we do not require an overnight parking pass.
We do not, because it's private property. They already have the right. They own it. They're maintaining it. They can park on the road.
But this Title 10 would allow us to do that or not?
Title 10 is very broad parking restrictions. Some of them are specific to some streets and not others. And it's my recollection that the city has a broad overnight parking restriction that is only applicable to public streets, of course, and there is no intention to make that provision applicable to private roads because people have rights to their private road.
We can add that language into this, right?
We can add, what we would do is we would go back to the municipal code to clarify that that's not the intention, and if that's the council's desire.
So because the intention of this, if I'm understanding it correctly, is the public safety and the fire trucks and the police department being able to access those roads, so there's no obstruction. We're not trying to, enforce any of our parking regulations on the private road.
That's correct, not the parking. Now, that does not mean that you could park in the middle of the road and obstruct a public safety vehicle. So I want to be clear there. And also, if you adopt this resolution, people would not be able to gate off their private road. Arguably, they don't presently have that right under state law, but this would make it more clear. Other aspects of Title 10 would include uniform signage if and when necessary or requested by members of the community. Any kind of signage that would go on a private road would have to be consistent with the multi-jurisdictional, I can never remember the exact title, but I know that Director Semino probably knows it.
I do not.
You don't? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's the state handbook that applies to all types of traffic control devices. And so anytime you're using a traffic control device, you want to follow that manual.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
A quick follow-up to Madam City Attorney. So under the current law, if someone was on public streets and an officer witnesses them committing a moving violation, and then they turn onto a private street, they can still be followed in there and cited, correct?
They could be, yes.
Nothing right now precludes that.
Yeah, just because you're on a private road, people are not precluded from continuing to drive. Residents that live on the street are going to travel on that road. Their invitees, their guests, delivery people are going to travel on that road. And generally speaking, people don't necessarily know the difference between a private road and a public road. So It's just that, and it may be, it could be frustrating for someone, for example, if they wanted to have the vehicle code enforced. Say, for example, there was unsafe driving. The city could not go in and enforce the vehicle code on a private road if that's where the violation was occurring.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, you're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know we probably have a lot of speakers potentially for this, so we'll open this up for public comment. And before we do that, I just want to note and we'll all enter this into the record, that we have a letter from Chris Adams from Monte Vista Lane, who is against this idea. I won't read the whole letter, but he doesn't think we should do this. With that, anyone that would like to make a public comment on this item?
Good evening. I'm Sam Glaze. I live on Forest Lane, which is one of these wonderful streets, have for the last 25 years. About once a year, somebody will park and block the street. They usually get some attention from me if I'm home or from one of the other neighbors, but it doesn't happen frequently. We also do have, after Athens Services does their great job picking up the trash, the next day there is a street sweeper that comes through and cleans the street. So if the council is really clear about this overnight parking business, it's the only advantage we've got. I mean, otherwise we got to pay to pave the street. And if you were offering to take over that, paving the street, and making us get parking stickers, I'd be great for it. But I just don't want to see us lose the little bit of extra freedom we have for paying to put the asphalt down.
Yeah.
So thank you for your consideration.
I'm sorry, sir, what street were you on?
Forest Lane.
I don't see it.
It's not.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
For the record, that's no longer part of the resolution.
When did that go off?
Lucky you.
Oh.
It's a staff decision.
Well, then I'm done.
And for the record,
Forest Lane, why?
Mr. Love? Yeah, can we answer that very quickly?
Forest Lane's a pass-through street. It doesn't dead end. So there was 2 of them on there that we took off because there's 2 ways to get into that street. So we felt for our need that we were talking about with this program that those 2 streets wouldn't.
So if it was obstructed in one way, then you can go in the other way. Okay.
And to the extent that other speakers are worried about the overnight parking, I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think that we're concerned about that. So I just don't think that's where we're going. So
It wasn't the intent.
yeah,
and I
I'll save
apologize.
everyone to the extent that's what they're worried about. Mr. Love?
Yes, Mayor Harabidi and members of the council, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this matter. I live on 201 Monte Vista Lane, named Tom Love. Chris Adams is my next door neighbor. You have the letter. Thank you for reading that, or at least noting that that was received. So as it was mentioned before, the property of our street is owned by the property owners. We own that street in fee title out to the center. There is a 30-foot easement that has been granted, recorded with the county, and that easement grants the right to ingress and egress and other access as necessary for each property owner to enjoy the rights of their property. So my neighbors can drive in front of my house on my property to get to their house at the end of the street. The other point I want to make was mentioned about the pass-through streets that are not dead ends. Monte Vista Lane is a dead end, but if you look at many of the private streets, it's wider. I mentioned the right-of-way is 30 feet wide. The pavement is actually about 23 feet wide, and we do have a cul-de-sac at the end. It just doesn't dead end. The Athens truck can actually turn around, the full-size Athens truck, at the end of our street. So occasionally there is an issue. Typically it's on a weekend when there might be visitors or gardeners or contractors around the street where 2 cars will park immediately adjacent to each other, and while not in the center of the street, not quite off to the edge of the curb. And the neighborhood deals with that very well. Knock on a door, find out who's there, and move the vehicle. And that's a rare occasion. We do agree that the access for public safety is paramount. We never want to see a situation where the paramedics or the fire department or the police department is unable to get up our street. I would ask, though, that given consideration that all private streets are not equal, some are narrow, some are windy, some do not have a turnaround cul-de-sac at the end, as those that were dropped off the list because they're pass-through streets, that some of the other streets be considered to be removed from the list, given their physical condition of the ability to access for the public safety and other needs along the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Archie Chin. I live at 200 Monte Vista Lane. Tom Love has been my neighbor across the street for many years, since 1992, and we get along really well. I'm here, and I think I can say that's true for pretty much all of the 13 property owners on our street. I've lived there since 1992 with my wife Lily. We've raised three sons on Monte Vista Lane. We love living in the city of Sierra Madre. I'm here to oppose the application and adoption of the resolution, specifically to Monte Vista Lane. I have no position as to the other streets, but as Tom mentioned, I think all streets are different. Our street is different. The proposed ordinance or the proposed resolution should not be applied to our street. I looked at the report prepared by the city manager regarding this resolution. I note a couple of things. Under the analysis section, it talks about, and I'll quote, city council action per the vehicle code will support the health, safety, and welfare of the public by ensuring police access and fire access. I don't think that's an issue on our street. The report also talks about, in the summary section, there are numerous roads within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city which are privately owned and maintained, but which still need to provide necessary access to properties located along the private roads. Further on, it talks about issues of public safety and specifically issues regarding excessive speed, illegal parking, blocking access to other owners or public safety vehicles, police, fire, and paramedics. Those aren't issues, as far as I'm concerned, that deal with Monte Vista Lane. In terms of the excessive speeds, we live in a cul-de-sac. Nobody speeds on our street unless they want to run into the end of the street. I do. That's my son, Jeffrey. We'll just ignore him right now. In terms of illegal parking, we don't have an issue with that. As Tom mentioned, on the weekend, if we have visitors, at least I know we do, we tell the people to park on one side of the street to allow our neighbors to have access. In terms of the public safety issue, our street is wider. I've driven up to some of the streets that are mentioned in the resolution. They are different. They are narrower. Some of them are one way. Our street is much, much wider. I don't see that being a problem with our street. We have 13 property owners whose property abut onto Monte Vista Lane. We've had a meeting among our property owners. I think I can say that there is a general consensus that we want to keep the status quo. We like what we have. We get along. We deal with the issues. I think this resolution is basically swatting a fly with a sledgehammer. Just pure overreaction. Okay, thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Paul Jacobson. I live on 611 Chaparral Road. It's a pretty narrow road that goes straight up and curvy. After talking with you on the phone, I did talk to you today. It was explained to me, and I'm in partial agreement. One thing that I've learned after living in Northern California before I came here years ago with private roads, that we need to legally put in verbiage about the parking. Saying the intent is not a legal term. I would like to see it having to deal with many problems where I used to live. I would just like to see something written to us and put in. That's all I'm saying. If we can do that, I don't have a problem with that. I support it. And then I have another question that I'm a little confused on, and I don't know if you can address it. Someone on a private road before us said Athens cleans their street. Sometimes Athens comes. Maybe once or twice a year, they street sweepers. Sometimes they don't. Are we entitled to street sweeping? I don't know. That's my question.
Great, thank you. I don't know either. We'll try to answer that after.
Okay, thank you. That was all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I live on
Monte Vista Lane as well, and I concur with Archie and Tom about not changing anything, just leave it alone.
Great.
I think that we take care of it just fine. I don't think we need anything changed.
Could we have your name just for the record?
George de la Portilla? George de la Portilla.
De La Portilla, so D-E-L-A.
Portilla.
Okay.
180 Monte Vista Lane.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Great.
My name is Paul Woloski. I live at 631 East Orange Grove. I'm at the northwest corner of Orange Grove and Olivera. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. I spent 21 years in law enforcement, so I know quite a bit about the California Vehicle Code. And there's 3 sections that you can enforce on private land, actually a private road. And that would be 23-152A and B, which is drunk driving. Second one is 12-500A, which is unlicensed driver. And the third one that you could enforce would be the handicap. Those 3 you can enforce. So I oppose anything if you try to put any parking enforcement. I would 100% oppose that. I don't think you have the authority. And like I said, it's private lane, so how could you enforce something on somebody else's property and impose fines and punishments? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Harry Tolachinian. I'm a resident of Sierra Madre. I live on Olivera Lane. I've lived in town for about 40 years. Some of my questions were answered, but I do have one. Our lane is a cul-de-sac, and it's narrow. Anytime Ernie Camacho throws a big party and has valet parking, and if there's 2 cars parked side by side or opposite each other, then emergency vehicles do not get in there. My question is, this change, is it going to be limited to vehicle code enforcement only? Or will the city come in and do a survey of the lane? And we do not have any street lighting at all. It's a dark lane. If the city decides to put in street lights, are they allowed to do that under this section? And will that trigger a property tax reassessment because an improvement has been made to private property? Let's see here. We just got through about 5 years ago paying around $98,000 to have our lane resurfaced. So we bore that. Can the city come in and say that the lane is too narrow and decide to do eminent domain and take away, what do you call it, people's property on either side? In other words, 5 feet of easement is needed, so I'm going to lose 5 feet of my frontage. Can that happen? Or can that happen whether this is passed or not? I mean, this is just talking about vehicle code enforcement. Right. It's not talking about eminent domain. It's not talking about street lighting.
Right.
But there is a safety factor. And will the city come in and post signs that say parking is limited to just either on the east side or west side? Otherwise, emergency vehicles will not be able to have access. And it was a lot simpler when there was only 2 people in the world. This is really getting a little bit too much.
Thank you very much.
And I voted for Harabedian.
Oh, well, good Armenian. Thank you. This is noted. All right. Whatever you want.
The trash truck guy that was here, I didn't know if he was ever going to stop. I'm sorry.
Well, we tried to make it brief, but we appreciate your comments. I think you have 7 seconds. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Armenian Russian, and
All right.
my father used to have 2 Armenian sailboats. We call trash trucks Armenian sailboats.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Judy Campbell, and I'm from Sunrise Hill. And I have had most of my questions answered, but I would just like to say that I agree that this is not needed. It's overkill. And that I'm also very supportive of having no parking restrictions. And I'm very relieved to hear that that isn't part of the plan in any case. But I just want to say that I and the residents that I've talked to on Sunrise Hill, there are 4 families, welcome the Sierra Madre Fire Department for practicing, which they do in our cul-de-sac often. And we border on the Conservancy, and that's where they practice. So thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Diana Bowler. I live on Chaparral Road. And I just wanted to say that I'm opposed. I agree that it's a little bit heavy-handed, and I agree with most everybody that's spoken here that they disagree. I don't want lights on my street. I don't want new signs on my street. It's just it's a small street, and I think it's just a little bit too busy. And we like it the way it is, and we self-manage. Bohler. First name Diana, Diana. Thank you.
Marguerite Schuster, 675 Mount Wilson Trail. And obviously I too live on one of these streets. And like many, have lived for decades, quietly, happily, without ever thinking once that there could be a need for such a resolution. Sometimes things happen, things change, and we discover with dismay that our city staff and our police are severely hampered by their understanding of current law in giving protection that is felt to be needed. Do I think that this resolution would fix things? I do not. However, it does seem to me to be at least a small step in a useful direction, and for that reason, I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peter Laws, 490 Mount Wilson Trail in Sierra Madre. Ladies, gentlemen, I'd like to suggest that as you consider this resolution, consider allowing Monte Vista Lane, Sunrise Hill, and whomever else may wish to opt out of this provision, the opportunity to do that through their representations to you. Concurrently, I suggest that Mount Wilson Trail and perhaps some other roads within this city have experienced what happens when irresponsible behavior begins to block a road, and you look at the threat created to your neighbors by such actions, and you know the city needs to take steps to avoid this. You have the opportunity to give your police and your code enforcement personnel the authority to do a sensible job. Underlying the provisions of the Motor Vehicle Code is something called safety and prudence. This has been denied to us because peculiarities of the law do not allow police to do a reasonable job, fire to exercise caution and give themselves latitude to respond rapidly, and code enforcement has been impeded. If these other streets want out, please let them. But for the benefit of those streets who have experienced the kind of problems that irresponsible behaviors by some citizens can impose, please give us and give your police and your code enforcement authority the opportunity to do their jobs. Thank you.
Mr.
Michelle Lentis. I live at 669 Mount Wilson Trail. I also live on the road that's being impacted. Right now, the road has been so narrowed at certain parts by an individual. I am not sure a large fire truck could get by. And I live above that obstruction, so my house would probably go down in the flames. It is also Mount Wilson Trail, I believe, has been a fire road forever. During the last 2 fires that I've been here, through the station fire and another smaller fire right on the hills, we are the fire road to prevent other damage to other homes in the hillside. So for that reason, I would hope that this would be passed, because there is discussion about somebody putting a gate up on the road, which would prevent emergency vehicles to get home. Some of the neighbors also, we wouldn't be able to get to our homes, but again, from the city's perspective, emergency vehicles would not be able to get through. Thank you. Lentis is L-E-N-T-E-S. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Bagby, B-A-G-B-Y. I live on 651 Chaparral Road. Been a resident there for over 20 years. I strongly oppose this proposal. One of the concerns I have with this is that it devalues the property value of a private road. That's a really significant thing. You're talking about 8 to 15% of your house. The other thing is that we make our own improvements. This particular street, Chaparral Road, we made in the last 36 months. We made improvements to the street. We also posted a sign, private road. I know that there's a different scenario for every other street here. We're not in a canyon. I mean, I was in the fire department, volunteered here for quite some time, and I know the ins and outs of every single street here. Our particular street that I live in doesn't have that kind of issue with the fire safety or things like that. I just think that the city's imposing something that will escalate down the road. I know how the city works. I've been a part of the city, and it starts with one thing, and then it develops to something else, and that's kind of being a part of Sierra Madre. So it's best just to leave everything alone the way it was, and that's all I pretty much have to say about it. All right, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Amy Messino, and I live at 635 East Orange Grove Road, which is on the corner of Oliver Lane. So we do have a pretty wide street. Despite what he said, it's 30 feet. Our neighbor Harry does have a party. I mean, Ernie does have a party once a year, but it doesn't really get in the way. But basically, we are deeply opposed to this, and a lot of it is because I have the vehicle code right here, and it doesn't say anything about most of the stuff that you guys are talking about. And so it does talk about traffic and parking laws. So if it is passed, I fear that it will eventually come to that, because that's normally how things go. And I guess that's about it, but just to say that we're opposed to it.
Thank you.
My name is Tammy Wolaski. That's my neighbor. I did not prepare this hearing. Actually, I was in my office. My husband called me 10 minutes before I come here. So I just hear, listen, everybody talking, and also I'm not, you can know my English, broken English. But I try to understand, I try to figure out, but I have some question I want to ask the city council here. So I heard maybe she's the city attorney. So I listened, she said is police truck and the fire truck cannot go inside the private road. I have my, the house, I called the police. Police went there, 4 car parking on the street, no problem. And also, I'm a neighbor of mine, they do have emergency. So I saw the 2 fire trucks go there, have no problem. So I never hear anything if the fire truck and the police car cannot go inside. And also my street, my neighbor just said we spent $98,000, then they put the, you know, the driveway, maintain the driveway very well. But that time I did not put any money because I'm not the owner in that time yet. But we did, you know, all the people in the street, so we love each other, we take care of each other. So now, then the city want to take the property, everything by code, by, I don't understand some of the code, but I was saying, I tell you some history. I was living in Arcadia, San Marino, all other cities. Why I moved to Sierra Madre? I live in this town 10 years. I love Sierra Madre the way they are. You can find it, I find this town, this city, I feel that is American-less. You can say Arcadia. I will say, I'm sorry, say in a little bit Chinese way, right? So I love Sierra Madre. They have their way, the history, and the little town, very cute, very, very comfortable. I live this town. So I like the Sierra Madre, they are. The city, you know, they have private street, they have everything. So if police truck cannot go to my privacy street, if anything need addressing in here, why city did every city council or city member or city code enforcement give us a call our neighbor, call our everybody, make some great agreement. We have a city, we love this city, we can do everything for this city. So did it. So no one tell me the police truck cannot go in, fire truck cannot go in, and the parking is wrong, and the people parking on the street. I did not see my neighbor parking on the street. So that's what I want to say. I love my town, and this town, private street, is belong to us, belong to all the citizens. So I really against the you know, this one, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
There's one more.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. A lot to go over. Let's just say that two of my neighbors have been speaking against me, the Peter and Lentis. Susan, are you speaking, or am I the last? You're welcome to go first.
You can just address us.
Okay, great. Okay, so a couple of things. Let's talk about the problem first. Okay, at my street, you already have a map of our house, Burview, from the county, and it's in your email box. You can see we are located at a 360-degree turn downhill, and that hill is probably at this, like 45 degrees from uphill to downhill to our house. People often drive, passing by way too fast. And it wasn't until our effort to reduce the amount of speeding cars that finally we felt slightly more comfortable only these 2 months. But for the last 8 months, hasn't been so. And there has been many close encounters where our cars were getting hit. I was almost getting hit until very recently, as of last month, I was literally 1 inch away from the front of a car of this one neighbor who has been cussing at me for 10 months, who is Eugene, who happened to be the son of this lady who trashed my fans, and 20+ crime today, crime report denied, you know, as said before, and thus leading to a restraining order that was issued by the court as of last week. So I want to focus on the hate coupling with the difficulty of the traveling as to why I finally mentioned to the city and the code and everybody and fire department who also came here and gave me a notice. This notice.
I'm just going to ask you, and you have about a minute and a half, just to make it focused on what we're actually considering right now.
So in terms of the public safety and or fire access, so the fire truck has never had an issue passing through my street. And you can check the record with fire department as to when they have come to our road, and such a day fall within our residency there. So that's number one. Number two, so if they do have an issue as passing, I have never got a violation and or ticket for it. And if they would like to do a rehearsal at our home to check to see if there will be an issue, I'm very open to it. And so as far as the second thing, Peter, I believe he said the code is in PD. I already addressed that. And then Lenta, same thing about the fire thing. And then also the, let's see, head-on collision almost happened at our house due to the speeding. And as far as the parking, you know, there has this vehicle that has been parked by Susan, I just spoke to earlier, for nearly 10 months on someone else's property. And it has been blocking my access to my lot. And so that request of having the vehicle move finally was only granted to me, to our property, my neighbor, who is a property owner of that lot as of this week or last week, it's several days ago. But I've been asking for 10 months. A police officer also came for me asking, could you please repark at a different angle so I could access my lot? It was denied to me. Also for many months, and again, goes into the ongoing issue here. And so there are 360-degree turn coupling with many unauthorized three-point turn, not from the resident, but mainly from people outside of this
Okay, Ms.
private
Lin,
road.
that's your 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much for
Thank you
hearing.
very much.
AKA everything is sent to your email box. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Susan Kotora, and I'm at 668 Mount Wilson Trail Road. And I just want to say that I support the resolution, and I only appreciate that I only realized recently that we needed this protection because it's been really difficult lately. And a lot of things that have been put forth are, well, I shouldn't say more than that. But anyway, yeah, I support the resolution.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hello. My name is Mark Fink, F-I-N-K, and I live on Coburn Avenue. Matter of fact, I'm a relatively recent resident to Sierra Madre. Been here about 5-6 years or so, I guess, and have 2 children in the elementary school. At face value, what I think you guys are trying to do, I think is really good. You know, if someone was blocking my street and I have a heart attack, I want the paramedics to be able to get to my home, or if there's a fire or whatnot. I think, like a lot of people here, I think probably our main issue is the parking, and we need to have some kind of legal writing in there that says that this is not, you know, what you're intending. 'Cause the notice that was mailed to my house, I'll read it. It says, would provide the legal basis for California law enforcement officers and those certified to enforce the California Vehicle Code and or traffic and parking regulations of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to cite violators on the privately owned and maintained roads previously described. Now, if that doesn't say that you're trying to take my parking away, I don't know what it says. I am a college graduate. That's what it sounds like to me, is that you're saying if I park my car in the street, I'm going to be in violation of the city requirements that say you can't park after whatever it is, 4 in the morning, without a parking pass. So, you know, I really think that we need to have some kind of wording in there that does that, and or maybe possibly issuing permanent parking passes to the residents that are affected by this, so that we don't have to apply for it every day or every year. Quite frankly, I don't even use the parking that's in front of my house. I park on my driveway, but I like the fact that I have the right to park there, and I do park there once in a blue moon. But when I have visitors come or whatnot, they park there. But it really doesn't affect me to the point where, you know, if I didn't have a driveway. But I just don't like the fact that you're trying to, you know, to take that from me. And I think a solution would be, if you are going to try to go that route, you know, I have probably 3 spaces, you know, issue me 3 annual, you know, permits that will just come in the mail to me every year, so that I don't have to deal with them or pay with them, because I really do think that the overall resolution is a good one. I would like to know that if somebody pulled a junky old car on my street and parked it there and just left, that I'd be able to get rid of it by calling the police. And I don't think that is the case right now, or maybe not easily. You know, so that's pretty much my major objection to this. And I
Thank
think
you.
it's up. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to the extent anyone else is worried about I think we're going to figure out the parking to where it's not going to be an issue. So, but please proceed.
Hi, I'm Rachel Rabideau. I live at 650 Chaparral Road. My husband and I moved there about a little over a year ago. The fact that it was a private road is one of the things that really drew us to buy that house. We previously lived on a much busier street in close to town for 11 years. We don't have any issues with access at this time since we've been there. And while we really don't use street parking, it's nice to know that we have that available in case we do. But as you said, that may not be an issue anyway. But
Right.
so I am opposed to it. Thank
Right.
you. Rabideau.
My name is Teresa Laws. I'm at 490 Mount Wilson Trail. And something that the lady before me just mentioned brought something to mind. She said she moved to a private road and she liked the private road because she doesn't currently get the traffic. Mount Wilson Trail, although it's a private road, it's a very public road because we have hundreds of hikers coming in on the weekends and on holidays, and our street is packed. And not being able to have the Sierra Madre Police Department enforce some of the speeding rules and codes and parking to some extent, because once it hits private road, there's no longer any sign that says no parking. So although our street is only narrow enough for one car to go by, these hikers can come up and park. And we've had to call the city or the police department a number of times, because even down at the bottom of the street, they'll park so high up that a fire truck wouldn't be able to get in, even at the very first public portion of the street.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Eric Neal. I live at it's Neel. I live at 170 Coburn. That's my neighbor over there. That's my neighbor over there. I think we're all pro public safety. I'm down for public safety. We have 5 houses on our block. I don't know of access ever having been an issue. I know the spirit with which we all inhabit the block is to enable and facilitate each other, and safety is certainly a part of that, and I don't know that it's ever been a problem. And Mayor, you began by saying what prompted this in the first place, and I don't think I've heard it tonight. I don't think I know the answer. It sounds a little bit to me like there's a special case going on around Mount Wilson Trail, which I was ignorant of until I got here tonight and certainly empathize with. But it doesn't sound like it's generally applicable to me. I oppose this proposed resolution based on the fact that I think it's an overreach, and I'm concerned about the precedents that it establishes, and I would want to certainly register support for the idea that if there are dispensations to be made around parking, that they be made formally, not casually, not through a kind of byword directive. My concern would be once the code was in place in the private roads, that would then enable other sorts of possibilities and policy creep that might lean on the precedent possibility of this. So I oppose in that way. I oppose it at the practical level. I don't think we've ever had any problem on our street. And then I would like to support the idea that if there are dispensations to be made around parking, which Mayor you've spoken to, that they be formalized so that not get compromised down the line. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, let's bring it back for discussion. So, anyone feel free to kick it off. I mean, there were some questions that I don't think we necessarily need. I don't think that anyone's planning on putting streetlights or parking signs on private roads, and whether Athens is supposed to clean those streets. I don't know what the answer is. Can you answer that quickly, and then we can move on?
Athens is not directed to sweep private streets.
Okay.
However, they change drivers frequently, and when a new driver comes, they just keep continuing and going up streets that they probably shouldn't sometimes, and then when they get directed not to.
Okay.
So that's why it would be infrequent too.
Okay.
I just want to ask the city attorney about the policy creep that was expressed here. And my reading of the code is, the resolution here is just pretty straightforward, and it does it entitle us to do anything more than what we say we're doing here?
It does not. It's really applicable to the vehicle code and the provisions of Chapter 10 of the Sierra Madre Code, and we could, in fact, add a new section to the resolution specifying that it does not apply to parking on a private road by the owners of that road and their invitees, or we could make it more broad if the owners of the roads are comfortable with anybody parking there. As things now stand, the city would have no authority to go into a public road to ticket someone whom a resident believed was illegally parked or didn't belong there. So that's something to consider, but there's no intent to limit the owners of a private road from parking on the private road.
So how do we remove a car that is blocking access? Is that not a parking issue?
That is not a parking issue. That's considered code enforcement, and we would use the overarching provision of our code enforcement stating that it's a public nuisance to violate any local code, state or federal code, and then we need to look at a specific state code, of which there is one, regarding blocking the access of a fire vehicle in particular. That's a lot of hoops to jump through when you need to get a public safety vehicle through, and what you can do is cite someone in
Okay.
code violation.
So just the staff report, I mean, it says here, who may otherwise drive at excessive speeds, park illegally, or block access to other owners or public safety vehicles, including police, fire, and paramedics. So, okay, so if we struck the park, and this is not the ordinance, but we strike out park illegally, we still can, if a car is blocking access to other owners, not necessarily a public safety vehicle, we would be able to remove that vehicle?
You could if you adopt this ordinance and that particular street is still applicable to it. But as things stand now, if the city has no authority to enforce the vehicle code, we would not be enforcing any parking restrictions. So, for example, a large truck that might be prohibited from parking on a different street, assuming it could fit, could park on a private street, and the city would not enforce that. If it had the authority to enforce the vehicle code, and that's mostly for moving violations, then it could also ticket a vehicle that we could tell was illegally parked there, and exempting from this owners who live on the street. It is their road. There's absolutely no intention of the city, nor could it legally remove someone's right to park in front of, their.
So how do we make that perfectly clear? What language would be required to make that clear in the
Well,
ordinance?
we could add an extra section to the ordinance that says something to the effect that this resolution shall not prohibit vehicle parking on private roads by owners living on the private road and their invitees. It could be as simple as that, if that's satisfactory to the residents. That's limited to people who actually live on the road. I could make it more broad, but then I'm assuming they don't want to give everyone the right to park on their private property.
Right, so that, I mean, again, that sounds reasonable. And again, what we're trying to do here is not impose on people, but actually give our public safety organizations the ability to help resolve a situation that is troublesome to somebody. The fact that on some of these streets we've never had a problem, you don't have a problem until you do have a problem, and this enables our public safety to help citizens that are having a problem. So the way you wrote it is if somebody abandons a vehicle on your street, you could call the police and they could remove it.
Right.
Other than that, it's your problem.
But right now, they
that's right.
cannot do that, right?
Right now, we would not do that. We cannot do that.
So I can't really see a downside. I mean, I heard, objections that people don't want this, but I really am not seeing what the real concern is, other than parking, or perhaps that they're ceding some rights to the city. And
The city is, if you adopt this, the city is not acquiring any property interest whatsoever on anybody's private road. We would not be first of all, this resolution would not give the city the authority to put streetlights on the road. That would be very expensive. And the only way the city would ever do something like that is through a landscaping lighting assessment district, which people on the public road would have to vote for first. So that's also nothing to really worry about. This resolution, in terms of policy creep, this resolution, whether the city can ticket someone who's speeding on your street or remove a vehicle that you as an owner do not think belongs there, has nothing to do with street lighting or any of the other concerns that were raised. And we can spell out and even restrict the not prohibiting parking. We can restrict that to the people who actually own the street and their invitees. Or it could make it more broad and say we won't enforce parking on a private road at all.
Right. Councilor Ross? Yeah.
I'm just shaking my head. I mean, I know that we probably have some difficulties in some of these streets occasionally, but it seems to me that what we're hearing is we just don't have much of a problem right now, except in maybe one localized area. But having said that, I mean, ever since I've been on the council, we've been very, I think, diligent, all of us up here, in terms of, pursuing everything we can do to make our city as safe as possible through public safety. So I can't just, blow this off and say, well, we don't have a problem right now, so public safety shouldn't be the foremost concern. I do think that the line of questioning Mayor Pro Tem had with our city attorney is the line of questioning I was going to have, and I think that we need some kind of, if we're going to pass this, some kind of ironclad language that would not impede our residents, their ability to park on their private property or use their private property as they see fit. And if I can't see that, I'm not going to support this. But we could get that, and I think you're talking about that in generalized terms. I guess I could support it. I'd like to hear what everyone else says up here first.
Yeah, I think the hard thing about this is the problem here that, to my knowledge, is, kind of spurring this to our attention is on Mount Wilson Trail Road. And there we heard from, residents, and Ms. Laws in particular, who said that parking, we should be able to enforce parking because there actually are problems there with hikers and visitors who are parking, and the city can't actually enforce.
And exceeding the speed limit.
Right, and exceeding the speed limit and everything else. So it's confusing and hard because the street in which the problem is currently arising actually does have a need to enforce parking as well. And so I'm struggling with, I think that there is a need that we need to address on Mount Wilson Trail Road. And I think it actually includes parking too. So how do we craft and I've heard from the other residents who live on the other streets that basically say, stay away. Like, we don't need you coming in here, and we definitely don't want you messing with parking. And so I'm pretty sensitive to both of those.
Right, yeah.
And so how are we going to craft something that, I'm not necessarily always concerned about making everyone happy, but I mean, I think here there's a pretty clear divide. And
I have a comment when you're done.
yeah, please, go ahead.
Before we answer that question, so I just want to be really clear. We opened this hearing by saying, why is this before us? The city council in no way, shape, or form has decided we want to take control of the private roads. It's not our intention. We opened this hearing by saying there is an issue. So it may not be on everybody's streets, but there is an issue on a particular street, and we need to look at that from a public safety perspective. I'm in total agreement. We don't want to do the parking. We don't care about the overnight parking. We're not going to make you get street lights. But we do have a public safety issue on one of our private streets, and we need to be able to address that. And again, you don't have the problem now, but when you do have the problem, I think that you would like to know that the city can at least move that vehicle or move that property so that the fire trucks can get up there. So again, what can we do to ensure, black and white, no questions asked, that we're not going to be dealing with the parking on the other streets? But again, to the mayor's concern, we do seem to have some issues on Mount Wilson.
Well, my suggestion would be to limit the non-application, if you will, of this resolution to parking on the private street, specifically to the owners of the private street.
And their
I would,
guests.
yes, and their guests.
So to the extent there are hikers on Mount Wilson Trail or
Right.
visitors, they obviously wouldn't apply.
And we're really talking about so-called legal parking, in other words, parking that's not obstructing all the other people who live on the street or need to pass through it, that they can get a vehicle through.
And how would we know that that's not an owner's or invitee's car?
Right.
The down the road, if you want to, if this is a concern of the owners, that they would like to limit or have the ability to keep their parking on their private street for themselves, the city could issue free parking permits, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
not
for,
have to do that.
yeah, rather not have to, but the only reason to do that would be to give the public property owners actually more rights than they presently have, which is, right now, they cannot call the police and say, hey, there's a vehicle on my street that I don't know who owns it, I don't know where it came from, it's been here for more than 72 hours. We would not come and move it or ticket the person if it's on a private road.
Yeah. Just, public comments closed. I'm not going to reopen it.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not really about parked cars, it's more
Yeah.
like obstructions in the road.
Sure.
like one
Totally
lane
get it.
of
I know,
Yeah,
we get it.
we understand it, and I just don't want to,
Okay.
I don't want to rehash from everyone, you know,
Yeah.
this is public
I wish
discussion.
I'd said that earlier.
No, it's okay. Understood. We're not going to open up public comment right now to everyone. Okay. Well, you know, look, I think,
We don't have to make a
yeah,
decision
exactly.
tonight,
And
right?
that was going to be my thing. I just think that we're getting to a point where we need to craft something that's helping the residents who currently have a problem on Mount Wilson Trail. I think to me that it's obvious that there's an issue and we need to help. I just don't know if maybe we need another meeting to let you and staff work together to craft something that's,
Well, we can do it right now. It's,
Okay.
I can add a section 7 that says this resolution shall not prohibit legally parked vehicles on private roads. I could just leave it at that, period. Or if there's a preference to keep the private road for the owners, I would suggest instead, it says that it would say this resolution shall not prohibit legally parked vehicles on private roads by owners of the private road and their invitees. I could go either way.
I just think that latter really opens us up to just a
Yeah.
ton of administrative, headache.
Yeah, so I
do
would
think-
make it just, we're just
Yeah.
not gonna cite parking on a private road
Right.
then.
So I guess my question is, can't we have a resolution that says you may not obstruct a private road to safety vehicles?
Oh, that's already, that would already be part of it.
I know,
for
but I think
enforcement, yeah.
what people are saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, people in the audience, that it's overarching, right? So the whole idea is we want to prevent obstruction on the roads, but then we start talking about parking, and then we start talking about speeding, and then we, to the people on those private roads, it seems like we're encroaching more and more laws. And what I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we simply just want people not to obstruct the road, not to,
That's
do
my
that,
view.
right? So if we can do something like
Well,
that.
yes, that's.
Excuse me, we're not
I'm
doing.
sorry, I know it's closed, but
Yeah.
Susan, she's not a property owner, first of all.
It's,
Oh,
it's
no.
irrelevant, and we're not opening up.
Understand, but
So-
I just want to say
Thank
our
you.
house.
Thank you.
So, we'll go back.
So
to
as I
this.
was saying,
need that address too.
as I was saying, the ordinance or the resolution as drafted already applies to obstructions.
Okay.
If you did nothing more, that would be, it's there. The concern though that you're hearing from people, and it's a valid concern, is that because the resolution applies Chapter 10, and Chapter 10 includes some parking restrictions, they are saying, and it's a valid question, please don't apply the general overnight parking restriction that occurs on all the public roads to the private roads. And we can call that out
Yeah.
easily.
You bring back the resolution with an amendment to the actual.
I could do it right now.
Okay.
I could.
Actually, if I think I would feel more comfortable if I got to see it all and if we brought it back.
Well,
We're gonna see it
would come
again.
back for, it would come back for first reading or second
No,
reading.
this is a
whatever it be.
resolution. It's the minute you adopt it, it is the law.
Oh.
I'm trying to avoid having to go back to the ordinance and do a first reading and a second reading and start tinkering with the ordinance, which I don't think you need to do. I don't think you need to tinker or fiddle with Chapter 10. I think we can just make it clear by adding a new section to this resolution to address the residents' concern that it was overbroad. That wasn't the intention, to say that we're not going to enforce overnight parking, or it can be as simple as that.
Sure.
That we're not, I might just suggest that. We won't enforce the overnight parking prohibitions on any private road.
Okay. So what's the pleasure?
I would prefer that it would, just a little bit more broad than overnight parking, and just say it
Okay.
to the owners and their guests.
We can say that now.
And I'm not that concerned about this being an administrative problem, because it hasn't been a problem.
Well, because we don't enforce it.
We don't
We
enforce
don't
it.
enforce it,
But it
but I
would
mean,
be
look,
around
if we get a complaint that there's a car there, just like the folks have said, usually when there's a problem, they resolve it. I would assume that means that they can't resolve it, therefore they've called the police.
I guess, yeah, no, my only concern is actually Mount Wilson Trail with the hikers. That's my only
Yeah.
concern.
So maybe
How
we
would you know
can,
if they're guests or not?
can we bring that back at a later date and talk about just Mount Wilson Trail?
Well,
I think if you,
no,
because I guess my preference would be to do it broader, actually, not just say we're not gonna enforce overnight parking. And then,
overnight parking?
yeah, and then don't even specify whether it's the owner or the guests. So therefore, we're not,
Yeah, that's true. I
Yeah,
mean, it's the
that's a
overnight
simple
that's-
thing to do.
but I think we're gonna have to revisit the Mount Wilson Trail kind of
Yeah.
the hiking parking issue. I just don't think we necessarily need to do it right now, in my view.
Okay.
I'm happy to be outnumbered on that.
No, I think we
Well,
need to
the-
discuss it.
If you, because it's a resolution, if you're ready or comfortable taking action on it this evening with calling out overnight parking will not be enforced on any private road, then this will go into effect right away, and people who are living on Mount Wilson Trail will get some relief.
Yeah.
And which would also be true of any other private road should a problem arise, because you don't have a problem until you have one.
Right. Is there a motion?
Okay, I will move that we adopt Resolution 19-14 with the exception of overnight parking, that will be, do you want to read the actual language?
Hear it.
Yeah.
Yes, I can do that. It would be a new Section 7 in the resolution, which reads as follows. This resolution shall not prohibit overnight parking on any private road.
Okay.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So that passes. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank
Obviously, we will welcome, comments, calls from you to the extent that there are issues that come up related to this, so, thank you. We're gonna move on to, item number 3, which is adoption of ordinance 1412, and other related items. And I'll let give a second to the extent people want to leave. We'll maybe take a 2-minute break right now, just for a bathroom break.
Okay.
And I believe that this is, Vincent, Mr. Gonzalez. Okay.
The sign that says more than you think. It's not just private road, it also has to say everything else. Yeah. Yeah, I thought it might.
So item number 3, we do have a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. You may want to adjust your seating, is some general ordinance cleanup that addresses a number of topics. So basically, the overall municipal code text amendments are looking at, for the most part, updating the city standards and rules for noticing, reviewing, and processing various ministerial and discretionary applications. And just as a reminder to the City Council, some of these items have been discussed in joint study session with the Planning Commission and Council, specific to historic resource evaluations, and also the noticing procedures for ministerial and discretionary actions were discussed by the Planning Commission. So there are 10 sections that we will be reviewing, and the full language of the text of each of the amended sections of the ordinance is included in Exhibit A within your City Council packet. So I'm going to be paraphrasing in each of the sections so we don't go into a lot of detail in terms of the specific language unless you had specific questions for each. So the First Amendment is amending sections 10.04.165, recreational vehicle. And essentially what we're doing is amending that definition to include utility trailer to the definition of recreational vehicle. And also adding language that states with or without state registration. Currently, the language does say that a California state registration, vehicle registration is required. We have had instances where a trailer or utility trailer does not have state registration, and therefore we're not able to enforce that further. So we're just kind of generalizing it to say with or without a California state registration, vehicle registration. Section 2 is amending parking, commercial, and recreational vehicles in residential zones. And currently there is a provision that says that you can park a commercial or recreational vehicle in a residential zone for a period of 5 hours. And this particular amendment eliminates the 5-hour parking provision. And this is specifically applicable to vehicles that are either exceeding 7 feet in height or 7 feet in width. The Third Amendment, Section 3, 17.20.125, landscaping and paving in front yard. Essentially, what I'm doing here is we're including a reference regarding standard driveway width. There's an Exhibit D in Chapter 17.68 parking that addresses this issue. However, the code section here is silent on that particular exhibit. It does reference exhibits A through C. However, it was probably omitted at one time. The amendment also eliminates the requirements describing minimum standards for circular driveways. We're completely striking that section from this particular section, landscaping and paving, and reinstating it in its entirety in section 17.68.070, standards for development, where also Exhibit D is located. Section 4 is specific to second units. It's in chapter or section 17.22.1.40. So currently, we have a number of noticing requirements that are addressing different issues, and they're handled differently in different situations, particularly second units and also in Section 5 minor variances. So specific to second units, currently we are required to send out a mailer within a 300-foot radius of the property, and that's supposed to be for 20 days prior to any decision. And what we are proposing to do, and this was discussed by the Planning Commission, to bring everything back into more uniform noticing procedures, is to omit the 20-day mailed notification and only use a posted sign notice. And one of the reasons for not doing a notification, mailed notification, is that this is a state mandate in terms of we have to allow in general cases approval of second units if they comply with overall zoning requirements. Sometimes we do get people for second units if it's coupled with another discretionary action that's before a planning commission or even a ministerial action. We'll get people coming in wanting to know what the second unit is about, and then they're opposed to it because they're claiming densification of single-family neighborhoods. We don't have the ability, if it meets all codes, to prohibit that use, and we will approve it. The commission thought it would be just better to post a sign notice on the property for 14 days. People still have the ability to come into the city, look at the plans, and see what is being proposed. Minor variances, this is another post or sign notification procedure. The commission decided to omit the signatory provision that under a minor variance, people can actually go to the neighboring properties and across the street to get a signed affidavit that they don't have a problem with, maybe it's an addition. And it also omits the 10-day mail notification within that 150-foot radius. So what we're doing to make it uniform with everything else that's prevalent for all ministerial and discretionary actions is simply to notice people within a 300-foot radius of the property 14 days prior to a decision, and also post a sign notice in front of the property. And that's consistent with all the other notification procedures that we have. Section 6, 17.60.056.d, section, which is called procedure, is we're basically amending this. This was also discussed in joint study session, City Council, Planning Commission in December 2018. We wanted to clarify in terms of who would be able to prepare an architectural historian report. And what we talked about was that this can only be prepared by a person certified by the Secretary of the Interior Standards. So it gives some qualification to the person preparing that report. Section 7, also in reference to the historic resource evaluations, also at that same joint study session, we talked about preparing an abbreviated report or a primary record. And what this does is just clarifies that language in this section to state that a historic resource evaluation should be using the State of California Department of Parks and Recreation form, also called a DPR Series 523 form, for buildings that are not eligible for designation. This is a quicker review of the project, and especially if we know that something is not going to be eligible, this is a quicker turnaround time. It also would be the product that we would have received in a citywide historic resources survey. So basically, this is the procedure that we're using now. And also, if a building is determined to be eligible for designation, they would be required to do a little bit more evaluation of that property, possibly even a full historic resources evaluation report that would look at design review considerations with respect to any new additions to an existing potentially eligible landmark property in Sierra Madre. Section 8, reasonable accommodation, section 17.61.030. This is simply amending the current language of reasonable accommodation for concurrent review, meaning if there's another discretionary action that's attached to that reasonable accommodation request, it would be reviewed by the authority reviewing that discretionary action. That could be the Planning Commission or at a staff level review. And the language here is that the discretionary action for a design review application would be excluded from this requirement. And section 9, 17.68.070, standards for development. The amendment simply provides a reference to Exhibit D, which is also missing. There's an Exhibit D in the section, but it didn't reference Exhibit D, minimum backup distance for garages at rear of lot. And finally, section 10, also under standards for development, same section. It's adding two new subsections, V and W. V is driveway width. It establishes minimum driveway width of 10 feet as described in existing Exhibit D in this section, 17.6A parking. And exhibit or subsection W reinstates the minimum standards for circular driveways, which was relocated from our prior sections 3, landscaping and paving in the front yard. The alternatives before the council this evening: you can adopt Ordinance 1412, providing general cleanup of various sections in the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. You could adopt Ordinance 1412 with modifications, or retain the language as presently codified, or provide direction to staff. That concludes my presentation, with the exception of the recommendation. Staff is recommending that the City Council introduce and give first reading of Ordinance 1412 by title only, waiving further reading to amend Title 10 and Title 17 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code, providing general cleanup of various code sections contained therein. I'm available to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Questions?
I just want to make sure Planning Commission did weigh in on these revisions.
The Planning Commission weighed in on a number of the revisions, not all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem? Yeah. You're okay? Yeah. Okay.
Just for starters, well, we're not changing this, but 7 feet, exceeding 7 feet in width or 7 feet in height for a recreational vehicle. The height, is that the height of the vehicle, including any attachments to the vehicle, like a storage carrier on top or a tent on top?
Now, I did a little bit of research on that and looking at the external height of a typical van or van conversions. It still says they're 6 feet, 7 inches in overall height. The 7 height restriction is 84 inches. And also the Sprinter vans, which do have the additional attachment, those could go, they range from 82 inches to 100 inches. And most of those vans are used for transit purposes, not necessarily recreational.
What I'm getting at is, I have an SUV, and it's about 6 feet tall, but I put stuff on top of it. So does the fact of putting stuff on top of it make it?
No, this is more or less retaining the language specific to the vehicle itself.
Okay,
If you're doing
all right.
additional attachments, that wouldn't apply.
Okay. And again, I asked you this before, but just for public, I mean, this does not affect the parking of vehicles on private property?
It does not.
Okay. All right, I have a few other questions on some of the other things. Oh, well, one thing I was concerned about was removing the 5-hour limit. And again, I just don't remember, I didn't have a chance to go back, but we dealt with this because of the Fairview, a person on Fairview complained about, I think it was a boat trailer at that time. And did we put in the 5-hour limit at that time? Because just thinking about it now, it just seems like 5 hours is pretty restrictive. I know we're getting rid of that, but the problem I have now is that it's very vague. It's as reasonably such time as reasonably necessary to complete such service. Does that strike anybody as vague? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you enforce something like that, you know?
Yeah, well, that would arguably only apply to service vehicles.
No,
so-
no, recreation.
It would
Well, but
also apply to recreational vehicles.
Okay, so it would.
So you're loading up your
Yeah.
your
Or you're unloading.
motorhome,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I just tell you, 5 hours, I don't, you know, because I forget this, you forget that, and you're just rearranging things. That's not,
So by
well,
omitting-
we're eliminating it, but,
So you would
so
give
now
people
what
more
becomes
time.
reasonable?
That would be, leave that open for interpretation. I would still say that in some cases, many people are going to be, if they're loading up their recreational vehicle, it's in their driveway or in front of the street, they're going to want to park that vehicle overnight and possibly leave early in the morning. This would give people that opportunity to do that.
Yes.
Unreasonable would be leaving it there for, 2 days.
Couple of days.
Okay.
So should it be more specific as reasonable, but maybe not to exceed 24 hours?
We can say that.
But yeah, and we don't even have, anyway, that's more of a discussion. I have a question that I'll ask.
Okay, all right. So let me just, a few other questions here on some of the other issues here. Let's see. Okay, so we're getting away from, this is on section 7, with regard to historical surveys. We're getting away from this concept of certificate of appropriateness.
In this particular section, so what happened was there is a conflict between our discretionary demolition permit ordinance, which allows either a environmental review, or if you have an historic resources evaluation report, you can proceed with a certificate of appropriateness. And this would apply to buildings, we're saying, that are eligible. Our historic preservation ordinance and our certificate of appropriateness is specific to designated properties.
Okay. Okay. This is on, still on section 5. I'm going backwards a little bit, I'm sorry. Okay, paragraph B under 17.60.025. This is B. It says a list drawn from the last equalized property assessment roll, et cetera, et cetera. What purpose does that list serve?
Basically, that is required for all of our applications, whether it's reviewed by the Planning Commission or staff. That list from the assessor's office means that it's the most current and up-to-date within a six-month period. So this is a mapping service can generally provide that for most applicants. You can also look on the assessor's application or the assessor's records website and actually produce that on your own as well.
We can get the list, but what do we do with the list?
We get that list. The applicant provides a radius map of the 300 properties notified around their property, and they provide a mailing label. And then the city prepares a courtesy notice. We attach that label to that courtesy card, and we pay for the postage.
Okay, but it doesn't say that unless it's written somewhere else. Okay, so it says you'll get the list and then post a sign on the property for 14 days to notify them that an application is being filed for a minor variance. I mean, should it say that we are going to mail there, or does it say that somewhere else?
I think this is general language that is applicable to, I grab this from other application procedures, and this is the same language that we have for a variance or a minor CUP or a CUP or a design
So
review.
you're confident that it's clear? Because it's not clear to me.
We can make it more clear. We might have to amend other sections.
Okay.
Code as well.
All right, this other thing about certification. So the person or the company that writes the report there is a certification program that is,
Generally, there's a minimum qualifications for an architectural historian who's to be certified by the Secretary of the Interior standards. One of those, if they're calling themselves an architectural historian, they actually have to be an architect and also have to have historic preservation experience. This does not say that all architectural historians have to be an architect, though. So they do have other qualifications, but they have to meet certain certifications.
well, qualifications are one thing, certification is another. Does the Secretary of the Interior issue a certification saying that you are certified?
I believe they do, but I'm not 100%. If
I
a
kind of
person-
remember from my general plan days that they do.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's actually something that they send out that you have to pass.
Okay.
Can I ask a related question while we're on it?
Sure.
So why are we doing this? I mean, what has come up in the process that has
So
caused this?
what we ended up deciding to do, and this was at the direction of the joint study session between Planning Commission, City Council, we had a list of qualified historians that would be selected by the individual property owner to prepare historic resource evaluation reports. And we would get a variety of reports, some very good, some very poorly written, very incomplete. And we were trying to strengthen the type of reports that we would receive from an historian. So that's where that came from. And at the time, that was the direction that we received from Council and Planning Commission. In the overall broader effort and discussion, we were talking about doing a citywide historic resources survey. The council decided in concert with the commission that is really not necessary. We can still achieve that same goal by using an abbreviated report is what we were calling it, but it's really a primary record, or the 523 series DPR form. And one of the issues was to try to reduce cost to the property owner, try to reduce the amount of time it would take to prepare that report, which in some cases was over 2 months.
Yeah.
And by sole sourcing it to a particular contractor, we would be able to control that. So the procedure now in place, we had a request for qualifications from our list of 12. I think I even expanded that beyond that. And we did receive a number of responses, and the city selected one particular contractor. They came in with a fixed amount for the primary record, and if they need an historic resource evaluation with a design review element attached to that, then that would cost the property owner a little bit more. But what we've done is being able to get something that's going to be done quicker. It's a team of people. It's not one individual person. If they go on vacation, then delays occur. So we've reduced cost. There's a team of qualified people preparing the reports, and the turnaround time is much quicker. And especially for those properties that are not eligible, that can be done very quick.
Yeah.
So this is really a help to the homeowner.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Okay. I'm good.
Got a couple questions, and I'll just start there. I mean, the only issue is, if it is somehow, is it I heard the term sole sourced. Is it going to be the same historians that are working essentially on each project?
It will be, yes.
So, I mean, isn't there going to be concern? I mean, this is sort of helping the applicant, but isn't there a concern that somehow these historical resource surveyors are beholden to the city because and I can see the city attorney in my purview, so peripheral. I mean, they're just, if I was an applicant and I saw, the historical resource surveyor come back numerous times and saying, something was historical when maybe it wasn't. I don't know what the hypothetical is. I would start questioning, well, which master is this? person serving, right?
Yeah, I would say a lot of cities with historic resources use the DPR forms, and staff, unless there's somebody on staff that's specially trained, they, to fill out a DPR form, what they do instead is have a contract with a consultant. And what the planning could do to fill out the DPR form, and just filling out the form, you can easily reach the conclusion, if it fits for the property, that the property has no historic value. It's not eligible for under any criteria, and it's a lot cheaper to use that DPR form to reach that conclusion than to have to hire a historic architect to do it. And that was the concern of the Planning Commission. I don't remember which property that came before them, but they were really dismayed when they saw that the applicant under our code had, and they did it, they did everything they needed to do, but they hired an historic architect, and I don't know what they paid, but it was several $1,000s. It was a good report, but the Planning Commission said, you just knew that there was no historic value in this particular property,
So
and
why
it's
have
a
to go there?
shame that the person had to prove it. Isn't there an easier way? Which was one of the reasons for so long that the Planning Commission thought a windshield survey could fix that. So that, you know, if the windshield survey showed that your particular property didn't qualify, you wouldn't have to pay for this. So this is something instead of that. It's a lot less expensive to do a DPR form, and it is really common for a city just hire a consultant. So one consultant does it for everyone,
And I've seen the DPR forms, and they're pretty, you know, they're pretty thorough, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
do you match this one? If yes, go to the next question,
Right.
kind of, you know.
yeah, it's a Secretary of Interior form that's commonly used, so they're not really manipulated depending on
Good.
who's doing it.
Okay. I just have two more. The driveway width, I just worried about unintended consequences. I just, like, why are we all of a sudden defining driveway width, especially for circular driveways? And
But
I mean-
the language under circular driveways is actually 12 feet,
Okay.
and that's existing now in the code. Our code for R3 properties, it's 10 feet. It depends on the number of units. But it's silent for R1 and R2 properties.
So we're just
Although
making it-
we have an Exhibit D that's currently in 17.68, at the very end of that whole chapter, shows an Exhibit D, shows a detached garage, and I can show you that
Yeah.
if you want to see it.
So it's effectively already in there. You were just making it
It's-
clear.
It's basically there.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That answers my question then. The last one is just why are we excluding the reasonable accommodation from discretionary design review? I'm sure there's a good reason why we want to exclude discretionary design review, but to me, it pops out as being troubling. Like, why is that special?
Essentially, what the intent of this action is to being a little bit more sensitive to individuals with disabilities requesting a reasonable accommodation. And instead of airing this out with another action, could be another discretionary action, coupled with anything else, depending upon the review authority. If it's a public hearing, we wanted to be sensitive to discussions regarding any disability or even explanation why the request is needed.
But why wouldn't we do that for design review then?
Yeah, I had conversations, and it could be applicable to all discretionary actions.
Yeah, I would think it should be, but we'll have that discussion.
Can you give me an example of what you're trying to do with this? Like, give me.
Like
an
if there needed to be an elevator, for example, and that affected because there was someone that
Right.
couldn't get upstairs and that affected the design, they could ask for reasonable accommodation or something like that,
Yes.
right? I mean,
But this is saying that they don't have to say that in public, right?
Correct.
They can.
Well, if I can, Mayor.
Sure.
I don't think the language actually says that if that's what we're intending. It's, as stated, it's a bit ambiguous. The way it's stated, you could conclude that concurrent review counts for every kind of discretionary review except for design review, and we're going to call that out and do
Right.
it by itself.
That's what I thought.
As opposed to excluding design review entirely, saying, well, if you are claiming a need for a reasonable combination, we're not even going to require design review, which I don't think there's any legal basis for that. I don't know if there's a policy reason to do that. There's no legal requirement to do so. And in terms of privacy, someone who's requesting a reasonable accommodation for some medical issue, we don't ever ask them, what's your disability, what's your medical issue? But during a public hearing process, they have to still describe, well, I need I need a slope up to this walkway that's no greater than a certain amount.
You have to
or
describe the
You have to
accommodation.
describe the accommodation they need without revealing or talking about their disability. They still have to describe the accommodation they need because there's more than one way to meet that accommodation. And it's up to the city to determine whether the particular accommodation they need is reasonable and whether a different accommodation might work just as well. And so I would suggest that this language doesn't get us there in the ordinance.
Yeah, because the way you're reading this, the exclusion of the discretionary review, or excuse me, design review says what? How are you?
The way I read it, we still have to have the design review. We just don't include it with concurrent review, which makes no sense. And if we're trying to say we're just not going to require design review, period.
Which I don't think we're saying.
Which,
We're not saying.
then you would say it a different way.
Unless that's, Director Gonzalez, what was your intent?
The intent is to exclude design review.
Completely.
So just do not have design
I
review?
don't recommend that.
Yes.
Because, why?
Because then, as described by City Attorney Highsmith, there still has to be some discussion by the commission in public hearing describing what the need is regarding for a development request, why that need is specific to a specific disability.
Well, we have to have that discussion anyway. We just don't talk about the disability. We talk about the accommodation that's requested.
Yeah. I don't want to get caught up on that right now. I mean, I'll just ask one other. My last question is and this is why, going back to Councilmember Capocha, the Mayor Pro Tem's point, and I think I was right. We don't use the word reasonable when it comes to the recreational vehicles. We just say is necessary to complete such work, but then we say reasonably necessary to complete such service. So I think to Mayor Pro Tem's point, it is a little vague, right? We say basically for your recreational vehicles, it's whatever's necessary to complete your work of unloading or loading, but then for the such service, we say reasonably necessary. So I think, and that's kind of why I was confused, because I thought the reasonably necessary only applied to service vehicles, which it looks like it does. So maybe that's just a drafting error. Is there any reason why? Okay. So reasonably should be in front of both, I would think, right?
I think that's right. And if you're further concerned about it being too vague as to what's reasonable, because I think Director Gonzalez is telling you that the intent is to make it work better, be less restrictive than the current 5 hours. But if you're concerned that it's too wide open, you could consider doing something like Mayor Pro Tem suggested, which is not to exceed 24 hours or whatever the magic number is.
And you have to get a permit, an overnight permit.
Yes.
Is that still, okay?
So where do folks with commercial recreational vehicles, if they own them, where do they park now? Where can they park?
They can park on their property outside of the front yard setback, so they can park on the side yard. They could rent a space currently for storage facility just to store it, but if they're loading and unloading, they would be able to, they can currently park on the street, but it cannot exceed 5 hours.
Okay. Thanks. All right. I'll open this up for public comment.
Hello, I'm Nick Latshaw, and I live at 151 South Hermosa Avenue. I did not know about the 5-hour rule, so I apologize. I have had my RV on my street in front of my house. The most was 1 week, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. I'm an insurance agent by trade. I've been doing that for 25 years. I read insurance policies. I read the language, the full draft, and service does apply to commercial vehicles. Service vehicles are commercial vehicles. So what I would like to see is everything regarding RVs in that section, I would like to see it taken out completely. And I'll tell you why. I have 2 biological children that are 14, and my wife and I, we also fostered and adopted 2 children. They are now 6 and 7 years old, and we go RVing. I mean, that's just what we do. We really don't go to hotels or go on long distance trips because my kids are, you know, just to put it nicely, they're a little crazy, and they break stuff. And when you go RVing, you can be a kid, you can be free, and you can have fun. An RV is a family vacation. It's not a commercial vehicle. I was really surprised when I came to find out about this, that those 2 were lumped together. Their uses are completely separate. If you're gonna make something about RVs, I would wonder what would be the motive to do that. Why do you not like families who like to go RVing? You know, it was great having that section before, because what was the one thing everyone hated, right? Parking. They don't want you treading on their ability to park and do what they want to do and live the way they want to live. When I get my RV and I park it over at Mount Olive, because I'm sensitive to the fact that it is an eyesore to some people, okay? Some people come by and give me the thumbs up, and some people are just like, oh, hope he's leaving soon. And I'm sensitive to that. So I spend $180 a month and I park my RV over at Mount Olive and leave it there. But prepping an RV is a 2-day process, because I'm a dad with 4 kids and a full-time job. I can't just pull up the RV, load it, and go. That's just not how it works. There's gas, propane, there's getting food, packing it. I mean, I wrote a whole list here, and I have 3 seconds. So I'll just say that I would love to see that whole section completely taken out. The current Sierra Madre parking rules.
You can submit that to us if you would like.
The current parking rules are very strict. We have a strict parking in this city, and every night when I have the RV, I move it up the street so that I can put it on the street, and then I bring it back and service it, and then I put it away.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Sorry, how do you spell your last name? So sure.
It's L-A-T-S-H-A-W.
Thank you.
Marguerite Schuster again. Just a question not about what is here, but what isn't. I had understood the possibility that in the course of code cleanup, that the issue of lighting as applied to R1 and R2 might be brought into a kind of coherence with what already applies to the hillside management zone and to the R3 zone, for obvious reasons, including the dark sky component of the general plan. It would certainly be helpful to us in the midst of our current difficulties if R1 and R2 were included under those strictures. Thanks.
Good evening. I'd like to start by addressing and thanking the mayor and the honorable staff, council members and the staff, and all of the weighty and challenging matters we have heard. My name is Tim Shakarian. I live at 89 Auburn Avenue, and I've lived there for the last 10 years with my wife Johanna and my 2 teenagers who've gone through the elementary school to the newly established middle school, which has been fantastic. And as a family man, I really enjoy taking the time. We moved here to Sierra Madre because of the family and the atmosphere and the environment. My kids played Little League, probably with your kids. So we're all about the family, and I agree with what Nick said. We have an RV, and we have what you're calling a utility trailer, which is a trailer that is 6 foot, 8 inches, but is 7 feet wide. And my boys love dirt bike riding, so the best thing to do with families is give the children what they want. Those are the memories that they have that they'll cherish forever and pass on to their kids. So I am 100% in disagreement with 10-04-165 and 10-24-310. I think this 5 hours is asinine. It really shouldn't be there. And like Nick said, I'm a working man as well. I own a business in Pasadena, so I serve my community, and I'm always taking care of other people's. I own an auto repair shop in Pasadena. So I fully understand what it's like to be compliant and follow the laws. But I do want to say one thing. I mean, for like Nick, I park my RV and my utility trailer in a storage place that I pay money for. At times, you will see it on my street, but that's because every Sunday the kids want to go dirt bike riding. And I'm okay with that. But on Mondays, there's trash pickup. So the utility trailer that you're calling a utility trailer is nothing more than classified in DMV as a PTI, part-time, permanent trailer identification. So that doesn't really affect anything that we're doing as far as limiting parking here. In the section 1024, it tells us that we had before 5 hours, now it's reasonable amount of time. Well, that's, like you said, ambiguous. It's very unclear, because if I'm gonna go through the trouble of picking up my RV and bringing it in front of my house, then I have to get the trailer attached to that vehicle. I gotta load the boy's dirt bike. In order to do that, I gotta make arrangements so that we can have all these things to be safe as we're traveling. I basically want to have a good time with my family, and I don't think RVing should be a crime. So what I would propose is, definitely, I'm in agreement with Councilman Capuccio, who offered a permit. I would definitely pay for a permit so that we can park our vehicle over there. Sometimes it takes me 48 hours to set up for that. Getting everything all set up, getting gas, getting all the things that we need to so we can have a safe trip. We're gone for 4 or 5 days at a time. Later on in June, we're going to be gone for 2.5 weeks crossing the country and just showing them what our country and this beautiful state of California and the city of Sierra Madre that we live in. So if there can be something that is reasonable, I would definitely be for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Johanna Reichert. I also live at 89 Auburn Avenue with my husband Timothy. So I'm a extremely empathetic person. I always put myself in the other person's shoes. Sometimes it's to the extreme. He doesn't like it. But I get it. You know, if I was there and I had a house and my living room looks out onto the street, I wouldn't want to see an RV there all the time. I wouldn't want to see a trailer there all the time. It's totally understandable. But also, if you don't do RVing, if you don't take trailers out to go dirt bike riding with your children, you don't really know what kind of situation that is. You just think, that's ugly, I don't want to see it. But you realize that there's a lot of work and effort put into it, a lot of time goes into it. We own a business together, we take care of the children together. It's difficult to do. Sometimes you get home from an RV trip, it's late in the evening, you don't want to unload that. You want to be able to go to bed, you want to do it the next day, you got to work the next day. So a lot of times there's things that are in there that make it so that you can't always move it immediately. So I just kind of wanted to bring that attention. I know it's not a view that you necessarily look at when you don't RV very often. So you kind of got to look at it from other people's points of view as well. Just like I try to look at it from your point of view and see, hey, it's not great to have an RV out there for a week at a time, which we have sometimes done. I try not to do that because I know people don't like that. But yes, putting an extreme limitation, 5 hours is too much. 24 hours, a little bit better. 48 hours would be a little bit nicer. I know it's not the ideal thing, but if some limitations are understandable, but extreme limitations are very difficult to deal with. So I would like it if it was reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you.
REICHERT.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll bring it back here. Anyone care to start?
I have a question about the whole RV thing. Because I wasn't paying close attention as to what motivated this. We're just trying to clean up language, but, so is there some sense of urgency on this issue that we have to nail this down tonight? I mean, is this something we could bring back and fully agendize and devote a meeting to? Because I feel like only the tip of the iceberg is represented here, and I happen to know Mr. Latshaw very well. I know full well everything he said is absolutely 100% true. I've witnessed it over the years. He's 2 doors down from me. His son is my son's best friend. So I have a great amount of sympathy for you based on what I know about what you do to prep for your trips. I know how much time, you just washing that thing can take several hours. So I would like to get a more thorough discussion of this if we could.
And full disclosure, I live across the street from these people, and our house is one of the houses that is covered by the RV, and the issue on our street is not so much the RV and the utility parking, but the safety hazard that it's causing people trying to go on that street. And it is there for a lot of time. So it's not just their house that it's in front, our house, or they'll move it up to the neighbors. So it is an issue on Auburn. So if we want to bring it back and have a full discussion, I'm willing to do that. But in all transparency, I do know that the neighbors on the street have complained about the public safety and not being able to see around, and the kids.
Can I comment on that?
Well, we'll discuss. Public comments closed.
Just a thought is, the way we've written it here is there is no hard restriction. It's whatever is reasonable. Maybe we just go with that and deal with it later if we want to. But this removes the 5-hour restriction.
Yeah.
It removes it to 0.
No.
No, it's not what it says.
Just for the camera's not picking you guys up, so it's going to be really confusing. Yeah, but the public just commented that it reduces it to 0.
No, our intent, what I'm trying to say here is, and we'll write this to reflect our intent, so I don't want anybody in the audience to think that we're going to make a huge mistake and write something and it means something else. That's not going to happen. So the way I'm reading it is removing the 5-hour restriction. This is making it the length of time to be reasonable.
Right.
And we don't need to pin that down. What we'd be doing is removing the 5-hour restriction right now.
Well, there's a 5-hour restriction, and it's not enforced.
It's not enforced, but I hate to just leave something on the books that is, you're breaking the law and we're just not enforcing it. I mean, we could fix that by just enacting this the way it's written. It may not be adequate to address the concern that you have and I have also, even though I'm very sympathetic. I don't have a motor home, but I load my stuff up and it takes me a long time,
As I've stated, it's a public safety issue.
It's a
When
public
it's
safety
parked
issue.
on that side of the street and people are trying to come around to go to the school, and it's taking up all the parking for the schools as well, because we have the parents parking on that street. So as long as it's reasonable, I have no problem with that, but, we cannot have it out there for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
Well, what about, to the Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion, what about, as is reasonably necessary, not to exceed 48 hours? Why?
I'd like the city attorney to address that. If we put a time limit in that, would that affect those that have handicap stickers on their vehicles?
It probably would not. But I I would prefer to actually have an outside limit
Some finality.
rather than just say whatever's reasonable, because then you get into an
just-
argument
yeah, you
with
could
someone
litigate it,
about, yeah. So I think it's the way that it's drafted, it is specific to loading or unloading of property and necessary to complete that work, or when the vehicle is parked in connection with or in aid of the performance of service to a property on the block. And it should be reasonably necessary for both, and I would recommend an outside limit.
Okay, I'm seeing a problem with, you know, if you're servicing, if you're working, you know, construction or something, that might be a problem, 48 hours. But generally, we don't leave them overnight.
Yeah, they go home.
Yeah.
And do we have a limit on the amount of time? I mean, if you say not to extend 48 hours and it's gone for 24 and then it comes back for 48 more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a problem. I think if they're just moving it for 24 hours and then coming back and leaving it for 48, then bringing it back, I think that would definitely violate the
I
spirit.
do know that some cities have where it's, 72 hours within a month
Yeah, something like that,
Yeah.
maybe, you know.
to accommodate the loading and unloading.
So no more than 48 hours in one period and a maximum of double that in a month or something like that, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Still,
To go out and have fun.
Yeah. Okay.
you know, this makes me think, I'm agreeing with Councilmember Goss, that we probably need to spend more time on this particular thing.
Yeah.
Broader testimony on it.
Yeah.
We can circle back on the RV. Let's go through these other. Are there any other issues on the other ones? The only one that I have an issue with, and then we can go back to the RV really quickly, is I just don't get the design review exemption. I just think I'm
with you on that.
misunderstanding. I just don't understand why we do that.
Well, there's
so.
no purpose. I'm not
Right.
clear on the purpose of it.
I think it's good intentioned. I think that what staff is trying to say is that we don't want to have to publicly require the reasonable accommodation to have to be aired during the design review.
You have to.
But
Yeah,
okay.
for anything.
And-
And we're not talking about the medical condition, we're talking
Right.
about a request to vary from what the code requires.
It becomes a loophole. I could see a
Everyone
contractor,
needs reasonable
you know,
accommodation.
just saying he or she needs an accommodation, and we're not asking what it, you know, they could just do it and sell the property 6 months later with this accommodation that violates our code, you know?
And are the reasonable accommodations part of the ADA? Do they have to have the ADA?
Yes, but we would never, we would never make that information public. Would not necessarily even go to the reviewing body, which would be the planning commission. But you have to have a description of what
Yeah.
the accommodation is. That is the law, and we are not required to just give the accommodation that's requested. It has to be a reasonable accommodation, and you can substitute any number of things that will still take care of the request.
I think we should strike.
I think we should strike it too. Is there anything else before we go back to the RV discussion? So my view on the RV discussion is, look, I'm sensitive to the testimony we heard. I don't think anyone is trying to rain on the proverbial RV parade. I think that everyone knows how enjoyable it is, and everyone thinks that you should be able to enjoy it. I think what we're really trying to do is come up with a common sense, reasonable solution so that RVs are not parked on the street all the time. And so to me, I think giving a 48-hour kind of reasonable time frame makes sense. I mean, I don't know. I don't RV. My kids aren't old enough yet. Hopefully we'll get there. But, you know, I don't know how long it takes. I'm going to take them at their word that it takes at least 2 days. Maybe it takes more. But I feel like if we have to have some sort of working solution here to where people that actually have their RVs and use them have a little bit of time to load them up, take them out, you know, and then when they get home, unload,
So
et
it's
cetera.
parked in front of their house?
I think that they should have 48 hours.
Parked in front of their house?
Yeah, I think for 48 hours, you should be able to have that. in my view, that seems reasonable. If my neighbor had an RV parked in front of my house or even their house all the time, I'd probably be a little bit aggravated. So I think the 48-hour mark, if you will, is a nice balance here. I don't know if I would necessarily cap it. I mean, if someone's RVing every week, then then you're basically telling them that they can't do that anymore, right? If it's only, let's say, 96 hours within a month, you're saying you only get to RV twice a month. And maybe they RV 4 times a month. I don't know.
I'm fine as long as it's 48 hours in front of their house.
I mean,
Well, it's hard to restrict it to just in front of their house, you know.
Why?
Well, do you mean?
What
I
if
mean,
a
what do
car
you
is
mean-
parked there?
Well, I guess what do you mean by in front of their house? Like
In front of their house.
like exactly in front, or could it be? I don't know. Could it be one house away, or could it be? I'm not, because I think here's where it's.
So
gonna get
I
tricky.
think that's why we have to have a bigger discussion, because the neighbors on Auburn do not like to have an RV parked in front of their house for weeks at a time. And yes, it has been there for weeks. It has. I'm sorry.
But what if
it
it's only
has.
48 hours?
If it's 48 hours, I don't have a problem with that as long as it's not a public safety issue. So we have to take that into consideration where it's parked on Auburn. There's 3 places that it cannot be parked because people need to come around the corner. So if you're coming from Montecito onto Auburn, from that side, it cannot be parked in front of that little office building. And when you're coming from Montecito to Auburn on the other way, it cannot be parked there because you just can't see. And I have witnessed it. My dad has witnessed it. In the mornings, you have to pull almost to the middle of the street in order to see if somebody's coming. And, I've been almost hit twice. My neighbors have almost been hit because you can't see. And coming down Auburn, they come pretty steep. It's just a safety issue.
You were about to say something?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very serious. All I can tell you, I don't have a lot of experience on that. I have a neighbor who's been RVing for years, and he's been very responsible. He always parks in front of his house. I think he parked in front of our mutual neighbor's house once, and she talked to him about it, and he moved it, and he's never parked there ever again. And my only experience is with somebody who's been exceptionally responsible, and he does use it the way he described.
And I will
I'd
say
like
the
to
neighbors,
accommodate
the
them.
neighbors have been, since the other neighbors have kind of caused some discern, they have been parking the RV in front of their house.
The large one you're speaking of is now sold, so you don't ever have to worry about it. We downsized it, and I agree with you, it was in the way, and in my defense, it was flat. And those are only truck tires, and it took 3 days. So yes, it was in front of your house 5 days. I apologize for it, and I acknowledge the fact that it was difficult to see from Montecito heading northbound to Auburn. So I apologize for that. It wasn't weeks at a time.
So,
It's been correct.
thank you.
Thank you.
Where are we on the, I'm okay with not deciding this tonight, but where are we on this 48-hour idea? If it's 48 hours within a week-long period, or whatever we want to say.
I want to talk to a few more RV owners before
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
agree
that's
to
fine.
48
Then
think
let's-
so- I think
I'm
so
in no
too.
rush as this is pending, RV owners now are under the 5-hour rule. So I think RV owners would actually probably be, behooved that we decide this sooner rather than later. So,
But it's my understanding that the 5-hour rule cannot be enforced. Is that, because we've asked?
It is generally enforced. If you're talking about, yes, it can be enforced.
Okay.
Yes.
so they have been enforced. I guess the question is how long do you guys want?
I'm good with 48 hours. I think that's.
Well, no, if you guys want to keep having conversations with,
No.
I'm okay tonight, but if you
We
guys
have a
want to
very
keep.
small sample size here. I don't
Yeah,
know if we're
I
gonna
don't
hear
know.
anything different, and I think we have 2 kind of extreme experiences to talk about. My basic concern is that, I think Mr. Latcha put it well. I mean, this is something that's supporting, a very wholesome and very important aspect of our,
Yeah,
our
I don't think
community.
yeah, exactly.
And so,
I want to,
I'll
I
go
don't
either
want to
way.
agree to, I don't want to agree to 48 hours until I understand better
So we can leave the 5 hours until we meet
So
again?
the 5 hours will de facto be in place, okay. Well then, look, how about we get a motion then on everything else, and then we're gonna have to direct staff to bring the RV discussion back expeditiously.
Expeditiously, very soon, let's do that.
Yeah.
At least in the next meeting or two.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So I move to approve all of the cleanup as proposed, with the exception of the design review, right? We're striking that one.
Accommodation, yeah.
And section 1 and 2. Or do we need, for the, section 1 is the utility trailer. We're not striking that one, it's just section 2.
Right.
Correct?
Section 2 and Section 8 are the.
Section 2 and section 8. So we're going to strike those two. All others, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion on the table.
The second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Okay, then,
we'll have more conversations about this. It's
Direction.
status quo at this
We have
point.
the first meeting in May if you want.
Yeah.
Sure. Try and make that, it
Yeah.
gives us a couple weeks.
Yeah, that'd be great. First, so it'll be the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, I appreciate your guys' testimony. And we'll probably all be contacting you individually, so.
Better prep too for it.
Yeah. We'll move on to item 4, the municipal parking lot discussion.
We're gonna have Analyst Carlson give the report.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. I'll make this as brief as possible. Item number 4 on your agenda is discussion and consideration of Resolution 19-13, regulating parking in municipal parking lots. It's recommended that the City Council adopt Resolution 19-13, regulating parking in the downtown district lots to match citywide street regulations, maintain regulations for lots at city-adjacent facilities, and direct staff to install appropriate informational signage. And as always, the City Council may defer the consideration to a matter to the future meeting or take no action. Very simply, above you, you will see a map of our downtown district with the 4 public lots highlighted. This is the Auburn lot, Mariposa lot, South Baldwin lot, and Montecito lot, East Montecito lot. What we're proposing is that we would apply the existing overnight parking permit code 10.24.230. Overnight permit would be required to park between the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the public lots. Vehicles could be parked no longer than 72 contiguous hours. Vehicle repair would not be allowed, and there would be new signage. As far as the parking lots that are adjacent to city facilities, we have the library one here on Sierra Madre Boulevard, Mariposa parking lot just south of Sierra Madre Boulevard, and the parking lot at Sierra Vista Park. Parking would remain prohibited between the hours of 3 a.m. to 5 p.m. There'd be no overnight parking at these lots. Existing regulations would remain. For example, at the library and at City Hall, parking is for city or library business only. There's no restrictions right now at Sierra Vista Park. And that's it in a nutshell. Again, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt Resolution 1913, and Director Semino and I would be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, I have just that general question. What triggered this?
Director Semino may know a little bit more, but I'm under the impression that the overriding principle was, especially in the downtown lots, they're created to serve the business district for overflow and for business purposes, and not for vehicle storage. So this will kind of put everything on an even keel, same rules for all the lots. And then we went ahead and looked at the city-owned facility lots as well while we were in there.
So there are people that are taking advantage of this and parking storing their vehicles in the city lots?
Yes, in the ones currently now in the downtown, besides Auburn parking lot, we allow for 48 hours of parking, free parking. This in other cities now is being unheard of to allow the free parking because of overnight parking with motorhomes and people starting to use the parking lots as their residence.
Yeah.
So we looked into this and we wanted to uniform all the downtown parking lots.
Okay. So are we requiring an overnight parking permit to park there?
Yes, that's our recommendation, is to require an overnight parking permit, just like the street overnight parking permit. So it would have the same regulations. It would have the 72 hours that they'd have to move within 72 hours, but they would have to be registered with us to be allowed to be in that lot during the overnight hours.
It's, okay.
Councilman Del Mar, Gomez? Okay.
Nothing.
Okay, we'll open up public comment.
Carol Canterbury, 46 Victoria Lane. And part of it was, I brought it up because this is the only parking lot, the Auburn parking lot, that has the restriction from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight, I think. Yeah. So you can only park there 6 a.m. to 12 midnight. And what's triggering to me was Montecito, parts of Montecito, Windsor Lane, and Victoria Lane. You can only park on one side of the street anyway. And to get in and out of Auburn and Baldwin is a pain in the neck, just for the record also. So, but to have guests or people spending the night or whatever, you could still have your parking permit, you know, the one-day thing, but you could use the lot and then just walk to wherever you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to sell some property, I'm going to use that as an example on Windsor, they had no parking on the actual property, so they always relied on the street. But to have it, the parking lot behind them, there's a little alleyway, it would work. It would help immensely, and then people wouldn't be on the street as much either. It would be on this parking lot. But I don't know how many people really abuse it. I mean, when I go running around with the dogs, I don't see a big abuse. I mean, people are there, and I don't know if it's a huge number.
It's not a lot of people.
I would say it's under 10. But I don't think anyone on that Auburn lot has ever really been, it's never been used the way a couple of the spots I've seen on the Mariposa lot. So, anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Karen.
10 o'clock, so.
Yeah, we're getting there. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Any comments before we,
Seems reasonable.
I don't have a problem with this. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is it. Any items for future agendas?
I would like to, before we adjourn though, I want to
Yes.
adjourn in the memory of somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no other items than we gave you to bring back the, yeah, okay.
Please.
Yeah, I was just told that Caroline Brown's husband, Roger, had passed away yesterday, so I just wanted to, a motion to adjourn in the memory of Roger Brown.
Second that.
All right, all those in favor in memory of Roger Brown?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that. All right, good night.
Okay, your first